So we did get a Region 5 rep. Deborah did get on, right? I think I
Yeah,
heard her.
Region 5, we got Gilbert and we have on, and Region 4, we have both Chris and Deborah Martinez on. So I think we're.
Just want to make
we're in
sure
good
each
shape.
region had somebody there. Okay, so
Yep.
let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. Thank you all for being here. And without further ado, I want to go ahead and ask for any, you confirm quorum for us, so we got that. I looked at our agenda and we've got 2 action items, and we'll squeeze an informational item in between. John will explain that in a little bit. And then we have 4 consent items and roughly, if I count that other informational item, 13 informational items. So it's a pretty packed agenda. That's as streamlined as we're going to get for the next several months. So we'll go ahead and ask for any public comment on items not posted on the agenda at this time.
Michael, this is Cynthia McCoy-Miller. Just want to quickly say that I've joined.
Oh, great. Thank you, Cynthia. So we'll go ahead and get your name in there for the record. And I'm still open for any public comment not on items not posted on the agenda. Okay, hearing none, we're going to go ahead and jump right into this agenda and try to keep us on time. John, I think
Fantastic.
it takes us right to action items, right?
Yep, right to action items. Our first one is our standard action item. Looking for the board to take action to allow us to continue to work under the emergency state COVID procedures. So continuing to do this virtually as we work through that for all of our public facing meetings. So this is open for board's questions or an action on this.
Any comments, questions from our board members, state partners on this item that's been repeating for several meetings?
This is Marla. I move to approve.
This
Okay.
is Becky. I'll second.
Very good. Tracy, do you approve?
Yes.
Thank you. Ethan, do you approve?
Yes.
Thank you. Chris?
Yes.
Very good. Deborah Martinez?
Yes.
Thank you. Gilbert?
Yes, I approve.
Very good. Do you approve?
Yes.
Thank you. Roxana?
Yes.
Thank you. Michael?
Yes.
Very good. And Cynthia?
Yes.
Very good. That moves. Motion is moved. On this one, let's go back for just 1 second. We inserted an action item, an informational item in between the action items. I thought it was really important to hear from Tom Hartman and Betty Eusipis. Tom, our consortium executive for the procurement that's ongoing. We're in an active procurement right now. And Betty Eusipis, our longtime consultant that's helping us out with this procurement. I think this informational item and the context of where we're at in procurement and the transition dates and how things are going and all of those things really sets up well our next action item, which is an Accenture Amendment 30, which is extending, we're requesting of the board to extend the Accenture contract dates to align with our procurement. So I think the context of our procurement, and then we'll present Amendment 30 for board consideration. So I'll turn it over to Tom and Betty to cover this informational item.
Thanks. Thanks, John. We can go to the next slide. Here are the dates of our procurement. We have actually completed the bidders conference and got the first batch of questions in. Got 96 questions. We've answered 15 of them so far, and the questions have come from 5 different bidding entities. The rest of the schedule looks quite firm, and we anticipate the contract start date of May 1st, 2024. And Betty's going to go over what happens after the, the time frames, and she's going to do it in a beautiful color slide that's up next. Betty?
Thank you, Tom. Coming to y'all live from the CalSAWS East office over here in Pennsylvania today. I just wanted to share with you, and as John mentioned, provide really a little more context for how the end of the procurement and the beginning of some transition periods overlaps with some of the contract extension pieces that Holly is going to describe to you in more detail. So up across the top, that first blue block that says infrastructure transition in period, that's in this procurement, there are two primary chunks of work, and those are reflected on the previous slide that you saw with Tom. So vendors can either bid on the infrastructure statement of work and requirements, or the M&E, the maintenance and enhancements work and those requirements, or both. So there's three different scenarios for bidding. Once the consortium selects the successful vendor or vendors, we have defined some transition in periods, and those are two different timeframes for each of the vendors. So you can see that we've defined a 6-month in transition in period for that infrastructure vendor and a 12-month transition in period for the M&E successful vendor. So assuming that new vendors are coming into the mix, that would require the extension of existing vendor services during those transition periods. And so what we really wanted to show you here today was to give you that context of the overlap between the successful awarded vendors in our procurement, those two top bars, and then contrasting that, or not contrasting that, but showing that in relation to the contract extension chunks of work that are in those boxes below, starting with that light green box under the existing M&E services, the technical infrastructure aspects in that orange row and block, hardware, software, and facilities that would have to be extended, as well as some imaging capabilities and support. And finally, last but not least, the customer service center components that would also be extended. So basically, all of the existing work needs to be extended until the successful vendors, as a result of the procurement, are complete from their transition in perspective. And I'd be happy to take any questions, unless you want to hear the rest of the detail from Holly before your action.
Mike,
Betty,
thank you.
yeah, I just had a quick question about these timelines on this chart. So the top two are the procurement pieces, right?
Correct.
So if those end up missing their dates, what happens with the ones underneath?
I would suggest that I would pass that one to Holly, Michael, since she is more intimately familiar with the existing agreements.
And well, I would say that we would need to work with our vendors to negotiate updated the terms of the contract.
And I
Yeah,
think part
wait,
of it
yeah,
is
go ahead.
dependent on how much of a delta there is in the schedule, because a small one we can probably absorb without too much trouble, but a larger one would need to probably have some negotiations and amendments of the various contracts to sync them up again.
So these are aligned on the dates as long as the timeframes are maintained.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Want to clarify that. Thank you.
So Michael, I think what we wanted to do was close out the informational items, see if there's any other questions or public comment on it, and then we'll pivot to the action item.
Any comments or questions from our board members or state partners on what was presented right now? I see Gilbert has his hand up. Gilbert?
Thanks, Michael. Just wanted to ask a quick question in regards to the amendment, and maybe this is going to be more in the action item, but if the amendment is rendered, but the same companies are successful in the contract, do the amendments become null? How would that work?
Yeah, I think we'll probably handle that, Gilbert, when we talk about the amendment itself and sort of work through that. I think, and Holly, we could probably handle it right now. That is expire. That is providing the option and opportunity to be able to do that and transition. If we get a different transition period, then we will work through that, especially if it is with an incumbent vendor, to be able to do that as we work through the contract negotiations and make sure that those items sync up, the closing down of one and the beginning of the other sets of terms and conditions. And that would be something that we would handle if it should be the incumbent through contract negotiations and bringing that with our attorneys, bringing that bundle to our JPA board for consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments about this from our board members or our state partners before I move to public comment? Okay, hearing none. Any public comment on this? Okay, also hearing none, we'll go ahead and move forward to the next item. And I believe that's the action item itself. Is that right, John?
Yes, it is. So I will start out on that. And you can see on your screen, it says approval of Accenture Amendment 30. It says contingent upon federal approval. I want to definitely thank Adam and his team for shepherding this with our consortium PMO team through both state and federal review. We do have both FNS and CMS approval on this. So what we're putting before you is not contingent on federal approval. We have received both state and federal approval for Amendment 30 and all that that entails. Let's go to the next slide. As you look at through this, and I'm going to have Holly go through this in just a minute or two, but there was a couple things that we looked at. Just to let you know, our current agreement with Accenture ends in October of 2023. So you may ask, why are you coming to us so early to be able to do this extension? And really the reason that we're doing that is because we're in an active procurement. As Tom outlined, bids are due in November. We want to separate out this extension from these procurement activities and make sure that we have this time period covered, that it's negotiated, and that we've gone through that and gone forward. As you heard Betty sort of outline those timeframes, the extension date is through April of 25 with a subset of the scope that will conclude in October of 24, which aligns to the transition periods for both infrastructure and M&E on those particular subset of services. Now, as we went into discussions with Accenture on this amendment, we did not negotiate any new rates, any escalators in rates. The current hourly rate is going to remain the same. What's in there, we did not renegotiate. What we did, I'd say codify in this is that in Amendment 29, the JPA board approved going up to 40% of the work going to the Accenture Global Delivery Networks. And part of that was 54,000 hours at no additional cost during the extension period on that. And this codifies that. So in Amendment 29, there was 20,000, and then we codified the additional 54,000 hours for the offset of getting up to 40% through the Global Delivery Network. So our current production and operations hours stay flat. We document that. We codify the 54,000 hours to keep everything in sync as we go forward and work through that. So you can see how the hours on this sort of translate. Holly, I'm going to turn it over to sort of summarize this and then walk through the financials, if you would.
Sure. You've already touched upon that first bullet on the M&E hours that will continue through April 2025 at same rates as we have today. The next category is where we see a split between the M&E versus M&O. Certain activities will continue only through October 2024, but those activities tied to the application, which is level 3 help desk, would continue on beyond that. The hardware software is part of infrastructure, so that's through October 2024. Facilities is limited to the level 1 help desk support only. So we're splitting that out separate from the rest of the facilities. There are some additional projects that we had approved in the last IAPDU related to some of our innovation projects and the additional client correspondence hours, which were identified following the former C4 County go live. So we have funding for that, and that's part of this. Imaging continues, customer service center as well. Those align to the description that Betty provided as well on a nice chart. And then the regulatory and administrative category, that's what we call the change bucket. We have included an increase to that, and that's for future change notices, as well as when we get to the point we're ready to define transition activities, we would do a change notice for that as well. The next slide has the cost details associated with these items. So the costs are organized according to the applicable section of the contract. We wanted to provide a little context for those new projects versus the extension, and you'll see down on the right side of the table. The top table are those M&E and M&O activities, as I just mentioned. And then the second table is the imaging. The next category is the customer service center with that allowance for future change notices, including how we need to work through the transition activities would come out of that last category there, the change bucket. So the total we're looking for approval today is $250.6 million. And I'll pause there and turn it back to John, unless you have anything to add, or Michael to coordinate for questions.
Back to you, Michael.
Okay, I just want to go back through a couple of points and just make sure I hear it right, and anybody who wants to chime in can ask. So the cost and hours that we have right now under our current agreement with the incumbent with Accenture right now, those stay the same. So in this extended period, there's going to be no CPI increase, no graduated COLA, nothing. That's staying flat. So we can have predictable budget on that. The other thing I'm trying to understand is there's a date difference between the 2025 and the 2024. It looks like the 2024 has to do all with hosting and hardware and software, and the 2025 has to do with the app maintenance, which kind of aligns with the two different tracks in the procurement. Is that correct?
You got it.
Okay. And then this is all going to be a conditional. We're asking for conditional approval on federal and state approval. So it has been submitted.
It has been submitted, Michael, and it has been approved. We didn't receive we didn't receive federal approval until just this week. So as we posted the agenda, we didn't have both federal partners. But again, the OSI team worked through that, and we have receipt of both federal partners' review and approval of this amendment.
Okay, great. That's one less bullet I'm good having to cover then. Okay, and then I see Gilbert has his hand up, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Gilbert's question or comment.
Thanks. So with that approval, they're also then guaranteeing the funds for the cost of this amendment?
That's correct. The amendment is already accounted for in the IAPDU that was already approved.
So this isn't necessarily an increase of funds that we're going to be requesting. It's just how we're going to be spending them.
That's right.
Okay, and so then that means this also is not going to affect any funding that's going to be available for the future years while we have, in essence, potentially kind of like two contractors taking care of the same services.
Right. Our last IAPDU did account for transition costs. So we've built that into the budget for future. Of course, we'll need to go through the procurement and determine how that works out. And of course, I expect to see some changes in future IAPDUs, but that's part of our standard process.
So Holly, can I ask a question about how we're going to track the funding when we get into that transitionary stage? Will it be tracked similarly to the way we tracked it when C4 came aboard CalSAWS, and we had a separate tracking of funding associated with that, and then it decommissioned out that particular area? Will that be how we do this one as well?
No, remember that the C4 budget and along with the LRS budget was all part of the CalACES IAPDU.
Right.
The transition costs we have built into the CalSAWS IAPDU. It is part of existing line items. We have it, we've got, it's a detail within the overall budget.
But to Gilbert's point, we will still be able to have visibility, or at least the project have visibility to see when the cost transition from an incumbent to a successor vendor and not duplicative, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And further, Michael, when those are negotiated, there are some transition costs from our current vendor to, say, a different vendor, those things will be accessed through the change notice process, and we'll bring those to the board. So we will not be able to access those and use those until a change notice is done. This adds some capacity. It sort of replenishes that bucket for change notices, because we were decrementing that as we went through all of these premise items. As you've probably seen from your executive summary, we were starting to get low on that bucket. This replenishes that to be able to have that. So as we go through this extension period, if there's premise items and things like that, it's in the budget, but it isn't accessible until we do those change notices. And this replenishes that bucket to be able to do that.
Okay, so then a couple more just assumption bullets I want to go through in my head here. So the offshore 40% is accounted for and codified here with the additional hours that were also aligned with that. That's now codified in here. And this also holds our costs consistent through the remainder of whatever happens with the procurement, and whoever gets awarded, our costs on our incumbent are kept held consistent, and we're not in a negotiation period. I'm just trying to go through the things this achieves. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct on that. And later on in the agenda, since we mentioned Amendment 29 and the 40% for the global delivery network, you're going to hear later on in the agenda, the quality and metrics are going to be presented as another informational item at the request of the board that you wanted to be tracking those quality metrics. That's a later agenda item.
Okay, good. All right, well, I've gone through my bullets. I want to turn it back over to our other board members to see if there's any further questions or any comments that they might have on this important item. And I'm including our state partners in that if I hadn't said it. So, I mean you, Adam. If you have any comments or questions on this, this is a time to go ahead and post them.
Thanks, Mike. All good on my side.
Thank you.
Hi, Michael.
All right,
This is Marla.
Marla.
Hi, I don't have a comment. I just want to say thank you, John, for this really good advanced planning. It's good project management, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Marla. And Holly's done, and her team have done just a phenomenal job working through that and tracking that, and working very closely with our procurement team to make sure that these things line up, tick and tie. The entire project team appreciates that.
Yeah, and I want to echo that. I appreciate us being able to line things up and keep them from a budgetary standpoint independent of what our future procurement has, so we can focus on that exclusively. And John, you and your team on the ground will have the funding and the ability to move forward with this. So without any other further questions or comments from the board members, I'm going to open up to public comment on this time. Okay, hearing none, do we have a motion to approve?
So motion, Deborah.
Thank you, Deborah. Do we have a second?
Second, Ethan.
Thank you, Ethan. Don, I think you can call the vote.
Very good. Once again, thank you, Adam, for your team working with us so closely. Marla, do you approve?
Yes.
Very good. Tracy Belton?
Yes.
Thanks so much. Becky, do you approve?
Yes.
You? Chris?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Gilbert?
Yes.
Thank you. On?
Yes.
You? Roxana?
Yes.
Thank you. Michael?
Yes.
Thank you. And Cynthia?
Yes.
Excellent. And I don't know, Saoria, have you been able to join yet? All right. So moved. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. I think we're ready to move on to our next item. And our next item is our consent calendar. We have minutes. Many of the action items from the minutes will be closed out in the informational items today. We've added them onto the agenda, so we'll roll through those pretty quickly. And of course, we're always open to any comments or adjustments that you may have on that. The next one is Accenture Change Notice 20, and this includes a number of changes that are a result of our most recent budget cycle. And these are premise items that we need our contractor Accenture to begin working on and working through those items. There's also in this change notice a request for some administrative updates for Accenture's address in section 41 of Exhibit X. And also to add a number of the county purchases that have already been agreed to by the counties and signed off on by the counties. And just to give you a little bit of a flavor for that, we know that Los Angeles has done a big purchase and sort of worked through integration of a Salesforce platform into their customer service center and working through that, as well as their enhanced call center platform and working through that and voice print as they prepare to come over to the CalSAWS contact center solution. San Diego County's very much gone all in on sandbox environments and have bought a lot of those licenses so they could have more licenses for their counties. San Bernardino's looked at some emergency IVR call flows and CSC expansion. Riverside's is reopening their Lake Elsinore site. And with the reopening of that, there's some charges on that. So many counties have looked at kiosks for lobbies and things like that. So all of those are accounted for, documented, signed off, and included in that change notice as well. So all of the costs for this are accounted for in the CalSAWS project budget. So that's a quick overview, Michael, of the consent calendar. Oh, I forgot two more. The next one is for ClearBest, and that's change notice number 6. And their work order, that's for them to provide those quality assurance activities on those premise items. And an extension of QA services from the Portal Mobile or Benefits Cal to continue to provide those QA services. And then we also have a Regional Government Services, RGS, and as most of you are aware, RGS is a JPA that does much of the staffing for CalSAWS, and we have administrative updates to make sure that we reconcile with the positions that we have, do an administrative update on position names, number of positions, allocations, the range in bill rates as those things are adjusted. And it includes additional position descriptions. And we also have a new subsection is sometimes we put people on temporary assignments to be able to cover some activities and things like that. And there's some provisions in there on, in the compensation section related to temporary assignment pay. So people sometimes can have a stipend and they have a fallback. It very much mirrors a lot of things that counties do as well. So with that, Michael, that's the consent calendar, and we'll turn it back to you for questions or to move these items.
Thanks, John. So the clear best change is directly related to the Accenture change.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any comments or questions from our state partners or our board members on the collection of 4 consent items that were just introduced? Okay, hearing none. Any public comment? Okay, again, hearing none. I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve as a whole. We have a second?
Second, this is Chris.
Thank you, Chris. And call
Very
the-
good. Marla, do you approve?
Yes.
Thank you. Tracy?
Yes.
Thank you. Ethan?
Yes.
Thank you. Becky?
Yes.
Great. Deborah?
Yes.
You. Gilbert?
Yeah, I approve, except for I'm going to abstain from part A because I wasn't present at the meeting.
Very good. And On, do you approve?
Yes.
Thank you. Roxana?
Yes.
Thank you. And Cynthia?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think that brings us through all of our action items and into our informational items. And I'm going to turn it back to Holly. She has lots of stuff to give you updates on, and I think some of these are follow-ups from questions that the board had when we went through our last fiscal update. So Holly?
Yeah, thanks, John. So I did want to follow up on some of the action items that we took. It was last May when we did our last quarterly fiscal update, and we talked a lot about county support staff. And so on this page, you'll note some of the dispositions of those action items. You'd asked us for clarification about what is included in the budget versus what is not included. And we did provide a summary of that to your county fiscal contract SMEs during our quarterly meeting on May 19th. We actually did include it in the May PSC package as well. We also, you'd asked us to follow up on some helpful hints and guidelines that we could share with the fiscal staff, and we did that as far as time study, best practices, and we did that with the assistance of Riverside County. So thank you, Ricardo and team. You provided some really helpful information that we were able to include in that package for our fiscal group. We also, you'd asked us to look at, provide some more details about the last CRFI and how the funding had moved. We provided a list of each individual counties that had a change, whether that was an increase or a decrease to their allocation. So we included that table in the meeting packet. And then you also asked us to look at, to do some additional research as to whether counties were claiming everything they could, or if there were additional costs that they were not claiming. And so we did issue a CRFI for that survey, and we'll go over that in just a moment. But also the other action item was to work with the state on the flexibility of the funding. Is there additional funding? And this is actually just an ongoing activity. We meet with OSI every other week, and we discuss various budget items, allocations, contract claiming items. So this is part of our ongoing activities. But I want to go into the survey results, and then we'll circle back to that in a minute. So page 18, yeah. So on the left side of this page, you'll see the response counts to the CRFI survey that we had issued, where we asked counties, did you have additional costs that you did not put on a claim form, and why not? And what were those costs for? What were the activities and the time frame for that? And so on the left side of the page, you'll see the response counts by category. We had 23 counties respond that they had claimed everything. They claimed everything accurately, and it did not report any additional costs that they needed. We had 24 counties that did not respond, and our directions were that if you didn't have anything to report, you didn't necessarily need to respond. So we include those in no change, in the no change category. We did have 3 counties that reported that they would have claimed additional costs, but they didn't have their time study code set up, or they had staffing shortages, so they just didn't have time to track. One of those counties did indicate they would have claimed a little bit more had they had more time to work through those details, and it was about $1,000 that they had reported. There were 10 counties, however, that reported they did have insufficient allocation, or they had activities that were out of scope. And the total they had provided was $9.1 million for this past year. So when we look at that information in comparison to what we have allocated and actual claims for this past year, when we consider that, we looked at all of the claims have come in now through this last state fiscal year through the month of June. Counties had claimed $17.1 million out of their total allocation and funding of 22.3. So that left $5.2 million of underspent funds. When we looked at the responses for the 10 counties, 6.7 million of that appears to be allowable scope. And so that would fit into one of our 3 categories of manual conversion, ancillary, or the planning and preparation funding. So a large part of that could be addressed. We can solve 5.3 million of that 6.7 million by reallocating from those counties that did not fully expend their allocation, and also a line item adjustment. We are limited in what we can adjust. We are limited and constrained by the cost allocation plan that funding lives in today. We have to keep it within a like-for-like category. However, had we had this information earlier, we could have mitigated that through other line item adjustments. And so we had previously asked counties to provide us that information through earlier CRFIs. So we'll encourage counties going forward to be sure and include all of that information, because it would have been helpful to have it, and we could have been more proactively address these problems. So for those out of scope activities, that included some staff time to participate in UAT, some committee support, some communication related activities at that local level to prepare some media preparation, some emails, various promotional items at that local level. And mainly it was about training participation. So those things are not accounted for, they are not in the scope. So based on the results, our next steps, what we would propose to do are work with the counties to update those allocations for this past year, redirecting from funds from the counties that have underspent to those with additional needs. And then we'll work with those counties to submit adjusted claims. We can only go back 9 months because the window for submitting adjusted claims is 9 months past the end of that quarter. We do understand these are spent costs, but I know our Cowan counties are familiar with this process. We've done this process with them in the past. So we do think we can resolve a significant portion of that variance, should the counties desire to do that. Also looking ahead, as I mentioned earlier, we'll expedite the next CRFI. We had already planned a CRFI for October, where we asked counties to provide us their updates, request additional funding, shift funding, and then we work with them to try and address that. We're going to move that up a little earlier this year because we think that might be more helpful for you to have that and be able to better plan. And it'll help us too. And then our focus will be on the Cowan counties. As the former CalSAWS counties, they're beyond that post-go live window. So the CRFI will be targeted to the Cowan counties. The other item we'll work on is providing additional clarification of scope so that counties do understand what can be claimed. As we identified that gap, a lot of that was actually claimable. And this is a topic we do cover at our quarterly fiscal calls. We'll continue to do that. We'll continue to answer those questions and encourage questions. And we think that's important to continue to provide that education. And then as counties do identify additional needs, we'll leverage the reserve of funds to the extent we can, and of course, monitor the overall budget to support the requests. Our upcoming allocation in this year is 25 million. And so we'll work within that and also for county support staff. And then we'll work within that and as well as monitor overall. And then lastly, while the original planning and preparation funding did conclude, we will open that so that if a county does want to request, whether it's a line item shift or through this CRFI process, we'll provide that opportunity for counties to request. We'll work with the state. We do know that at the minimum, we'll have to continue to adhere to the conditions that were tied to that funding, which involves some quarterly reporting. And then we'll assess those based on the responses, and we'll work with the state to determine how to move forward with that. And so those are our next steps. And then I'm actually going to pause here and see if there, because that was a lot, and see if there are questions, Michael.
Hey, Holly, I appreciate you going through that. And just as Michael, as you start looking at questions, this is just acknowledgement of this was a good, rich discussion in May that resulted in an action item that was really beneficial for us to maximize the use of our budget and to be able to benefit the counties to be able to do that. Appreciate Holly and her team facilitating that. I think this exercise has also highlighted some items to continue with the importance of those quarterly fiscal meetings and to get out ahead of this so that we can incrementally work through the fiscal year on that and not have to do so many backs on these things and to be able to help it going forward. So great action item from the board and great follow-up from the PMO team. Michael, before we turn it back to you, we're going to sort of split this into 2 points because that sort of closes that out, and then there's the fiscal update.
Yeah, so this would be a good time to kind of ask some questions on this. So the folks that have formulated their thoughts around it will have a point of reference. There's a really great silver lining I see in this in terms of identifying potential maximizing our funding streams. And I know the counties know that because we have to do it at the county level as well. So we're dealing with our admin allocations. We're doing the same kind of thing. I just was wondering if there's, John, if there's been a proactive sense of we've identified these areas of funding and tying it to like our readiness tracking that we have with the Calwin counties and seeing where there might be gaps from a funding. What are the enablers to actually helping us close those readiness gaps? And if some of it's actually reallocation of funding, how we can sort of jump at that as opposed to wait for people to, approach us. Is there going to be a more proactive approach to it?
Yeah, going forward there is, and I think that was the look back as we talked through with counties of these are allowable items to be able to do, give us these items. And of course we had to filter things out that were not allowable to be claimed on things that were out of scope. So there was those activities and items. And then I think it highlighted, and we're going to re-emphasize going forward as we're going through each one of the waves, is maximize the use of your allocation. And if you need more and you need adjustments, let us go through a process with you all immediately to be able to do that, because we want to be able to maximize that. I think the other thing on the out of scope is, someday we would love to have those things put in scope and get those items. And we will ask for those things, but usually that's sort of a dialogue with our state partners on what is allowable and what isn't. We'll highlight those items and attempt to have a dialogue as we prepare our next APD to see if they're open to getting those things back in scope. Not that they're ever in scope, but see if we can get those back in scope. So
So
yes,
did I-
quarterly fiscal meetings are where that proactive activity is taking place.
Okay, great, John. I think this is great. This is great news for the Calhoun counties to know that there is an ability to potentially access additional funding if funding is the challenge. I do want to emphasize that we need to maximize these allocations in every way possible. Did I hear the numbers right that there was 9.1 million identified as potential need, but are those all out of scope, or was that in aggregate? Some of it's out of scope.
It was only a subset. There was a 9.1 million, 6.7 million was appropriate. And then we had the ability to
5.2.
accommodate the 5.3. So we not leaving a penny on the table of that. So that leaves, about 1.3 of the 6.7 that couldn't be mitigated through earlier, that we think could have been mitigated through earlier notifications if we had more time. It wasn't sort of that look back that we can do. And that's what we're going to be having in place next year so that we don't have that situation.
Excellent. Okay, this couldn't be more perfect timing with Calhoun rollout coming up. So that's great. I want to open it up to our other board members or state partners if they have any questions or comments on this particular item, particularly Calhoun directors that are out there. Okay, I'm not hearing any public comment. Okay, then I think we can proceed to the more general fiscal update.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Holly. That was really educational. Thank you.
Yeah. And just again, I encourage the counties to reach out to us, pmo.fiscal@calsaws.org for any questions, because I know you get down into the details and like, well, can I claim it? Can I not claim it? And so we can work through that with you if you have a question about it. And also just keep us posted on the needs. We'll issue that CRFI earlier, but also it's very, very important to respond to those with your latest and greatest information. So with that, I will turn to the fiscal report. This page is just our organization page. You'll know we no longer have the LRS and C4 categories. So those have officially been retired. The next page we go into, I did want to close out this past year, state fiscal year 21-22, and this does tick back to what we were just talking about. You'll actually see, assuming we counties will claim the additional 5.2, if we get those adjusted claims, we will fully utilize that category of funding. And we do know there are some additional claims coming in. Counties have already notified us. So we've also accounted for that in that 5.4 projection. The other savings though here, just note, again, we have to stick within the cap. So unfortunately, I can't move, training savings into a non-app dev savings at this point. But overall, we had previously reported that we were projecting to spend 97.6%, and we're at 96.6% overall.
So Holly, when you were mentioning that in terms of movement like that, is that restricted at a category level?
It's the cost allocation plan level. Okay. And that's why the fall process, when we ask counties to provide us your updates, that's really in particular important so that we can incorporate updates to the IAPDU. A little bit more flexibility at that point. By the time we get to the spring, we start to have more constraints.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Priori, I was just wondering in terms of, I think sometimes, especially when you're new to this, there's not an understanding of what you can spend, and as some counties spend more than others, is there like a sharing of information? Because some counties just may not think of some of these items.
Yeah, we talk about this. This is covered in depth in our quarterly fiscal conference call. as far as we go over those categories that counties have allocations for. And we do a lot of focus on the county support staff category. And we provide clarification of travel funds. And then we have consortium personnel funds for any county that has staff assigned to the project. The remainder of the costs are vendor related, so they come through our contracts. And then San Bernardino County has the allocation for that. And we work very closely with San Bernardino County and the auditor controller to make sure we're maximizing and balancing and appropriately using the funds.
Holly, to Sayori's point, is there any benefit to possibly like an executive primer that could help connect them a little bit with their fiscal folks on this that the directors could use?
Sure, I'm happy for any suggestions, Michael. We've brought the topic to this group in May. We walked through the scope and, high level scope in terms of the different categories. We've gone over that scope with during our quarterly fiscal conference calls, and we've covered it at different points with OPAC as well. So are you thinking of like a small handbook with guidance?
I was thinking of just something rolled up a little bit more that the directors could use to engage their fiscal reps, because right now we're, especially for the Cowan counties to be deciding, the directors are getting directly engaged in some of these. So them knowing where they need to kind of pursue resources and talk to their fiscal rep on this and say, can you tell me how we're maximizing the revenue? I think it would enable them to have those conversations if they better understood it. I mean, they don't have to become an accountant, but giving them enough to sort of even manage within their own team.
So I would definitely point back to our May packet that had the categories, and then happy to add to that if you would like.
Or else if we need to refresh that or resend that to, refamiliarize folks with that and bring it back through, we could refresh and resend that as well, and see if that hits the mark as we go through, just to make sure that everybody has the latest and greatest materials.
Okay. And I haven't seen it, and I'm not asking to recreate anything. I just want to make sure it's something that the directors themselves can actually understand, or at least a piece of it they understand, so that they can engage their fiscal folks.
I'll take that as an action item, Michael, to pull what we've previously shared and maybe repackage it, and we can distribute that. We could send it out via CIT, and then also include it in this board package next month, if that would be helpful.
So do you think that might help?
I think maybe for, again, the Cal-Win counties, my thing is, we know what we know. And if we see that the spending is not taking place, I'm wondering, sometimes there's just not an understanding, but if I'm speaking out of turn, and if folks don't think that it would be helpful, again, our goal is not to reinvent the wheel if it's something that's already provided.
Hey, Sayori, maybe I could have a suggestion of, I think on these updates, we could maybe just start showing where counties are in their allocations and what that sort of burn rate is as we go forward. And I think those items are shown on that. And we can make sure that it is brought to those quarterly fiscal meetings. If directors want to be able to receive an optional notice for those, that's fine as well. We could send an optional notice to be able to attend those with your fiscal manager. I think what Holly said before is, when in doubt, reach out. If somebody's thinking that, boy, I am underspending a little bit, or there's money there, how come we're not claiming to the maximum of our allocation? What is it? What do we need some guidance? Our PMO team's ready to, hop on a call or something else like that with your fiscal staff and sort of work through any questions or training or something like that we can.
Well, I think that'd be great, John. I think that the burn rate would be excellent. I know the directors could definitely use that to see if they can see if they're behind on what they're allocated.
So the action item will be to incorporate an additional level of detail in the quarterly fiscal report we do that with some of the other items that you had previously requested as a board. So we can include some additional detail in this quarterly report as well. Happy to do that. That would work.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Great discussion. Next page, we're going to go ahead and look to current year. We're projecting, we're going to spend the funds at this point. Of course, as we progress through the year, we'll start to see more trends that will more fully inform these projections. But as we're just starting out the year, we'll assume that we're going to fully expend the funds. I do want to point out here on this, I did split out the, my team split out the premise categories separate from the rest of the CalSAWS. So if you're looking between the last page and this page, and that's something to consider if you're looking year over year. But let me go ahead and keep going here in the interest of time. Slide 23, we do have the consortium personnel for this year. The FTE counts have been updated based on the positions that are included in the budget for this year, which does include some new benefits cal positions that have been funded. Our next page, we have our allocation for the changes. This is our maintenance and enhancements. Pardon my footnote there. I didn't update it from the last one. But more detail for the change bucket is included on the next page. So the hours, the projected hours for this year for CalWINS are 8,000 hours a month. And this is service month now. For CalSAWS, we've included the standard 15,075 hours per month, plus a portion of the hours that were identified in Amendment 29. So the 20,000 hours we talked about earlier, we've prorated that, and 9,600 of those hours are included here as well, as negotiated along with that increase to the offshore threshold. In addition here, we've included the Amendment 30 hours for client correspondence that you just approved. So those are broken out separately here for us to track. And then for benefits cal, we did receive approval of funding for an additional 1,250 hours on average per month, in addition to the baseline hours of 1,250 for this year. You will see a change order from Deloitte coming up in this next month for that. So we've accounted for that here, and we're tracking those hours and reporting out. If I did include last year's, so state fiscal year 21-22 chart and details. That's all included in a package that is attached to the board. It's in the board package. Okay, next page, contract obligations. We closed out the prior year, but we did carry forward a few of our liquidated damages that should be cleared out this month. Hours and credits, I want to make a note here for the modernization hours. We've increased those to account for contract year 8 for Gainwell. It's a partial year through January 2023 for the contract year. An extension for Gainwell is in process, but it will not include a further allowance for modernization hours. So this is the maximum of the modernization hours. As a reminder, these hours do have to be used for migration related activities, and we did account in the projection for those benefits cal technical help desk hours that we talked about at the last board meeting last month. That was a companion to the Accenture change notice, and that also further discussion and clarification will be provided in a later agenda item today. With that, the next page is our change notice tracking. We consolidated the prior year, but we carry that balance cumulatively forward, and we did include the change notices that were approved earlier in this meeting. And then that brings me to the end of the report. So I'll turn it back to Michael for questions from the board or the public.
Thank you, Holly. It's very important for us to have this transparency around the fiscal aspects of this project, and you do a tremendous job of explaining the Greek to us. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up to other comments or questions from our board members or our state partners on the remainder of this presentation. See how good you did a job of explaining? All right, any public comment? Great. Once again, thank you very much for watching the bank account for us.
Thanks, Michael.
We'll go ahead and move on to the next item. Retrospective and corrective actions, production incidents. Yeah, I think that would be Arnold, right?
Yeah, if we wanted to jump in, we know that we've had some recent production items. We've had some root cause analysis that was going on. We had a conversation at last board meeting, but we thought it was good to say, okay, from a production standpoint, and we know that all of our production counties are saying, okay, there's CalWIN migration that's coming up, but we need to make sure that the system's operational for all of our production counties, and those are going on. And we've had a few incidents. So I've asked Arnold to come in and look at and provide a report to the board, and this will be going to the project steering committee on some of these incidents that we've had, what's being done to remediate those as we go forward, so they don't impact our production counties, and we're preparing for migration as well. So Arnold, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, John, and thank you to the board as well as the state of California. So just going back to the start of the meeting with the approval of that extension, we appreciate the partnership and remain absolutely dedicated to continue to provide the service to the citizens of California. And with that, we take production extremely seriously. Production is our #1 priority. And so when we have incidents such as the 3 that have occurred over the last 2 weeks, we take those very seriously and are working diligently to address the true root cause of them so that we can avoid reoccurrence. So the first one we talked about, I had given a brief briefing to the board during the last JPA on, and this was the outage that we occurred on July 15th. This had to do with our Forge Rock services, and it started as an intermittent outage earlier in the morning. That's when reports started coming in. The impact actually started the night before as a result of an emergency change. It was intermittent until we took a full outage. That was a planned emergency change that turned into an extension while we were restoring the service and stability. So as we peeled into the root cause analysis, the RCA on this, we traced the root back to a number of items that predate the actual change that was made on the 14th, as well as the nature of the change that was made on the 14th as well. And that was an emergency change made on the night of July 14th, that Thursday night, that left one of the nodes of the Forge Rock system unhealthy. So Forge Rock has multiple servers that we can spread the load across for both high availability and load purposes. One of those that did not change, there was an error while applying the change, and as a result, it was not in a healthy state, and that went undetected. So that's what caused the original instability as far as sporadic nature. With about 20% of the transactions were failing from that point until 12:30 when we took the full system down. When we were looking at ways to recover, we had also noted that the DER region could not be failed over to. And so that was ultimately resolved with the network connectivity change, but there are additional actions that we're taking to validate the ongoing health and the availability of that region in the future. We ultimately restored the service as a result of redeploying it 2 to 3 nodes and leaving the other one out of rotation. And that's what caused the service to return at approximately 2:30 in the afternoon on the 15th. So post-event actions have occurred. The disaster recovery region has been remediated and is online and is being validated to be functional and available for future occurrences. There have been operational changes as well on the monitoring and alerting on that region, as well as escalation processes within the team in the event that health checks come back as negative, to treat it as a priority one incident that really involves all hands on deck until health is restored. The second component is looking at the manual nature of the changes that were made Thursday night. And those by manual, it is an engineer operating on the keyboard. So we were revisiting those emergency changes, one, for the cause of the emergency change, and two, for the method in which it was applied, and changing the operational cadence to force the cadence to be applying those changes to production via a script that has been proven in the lower environments rather than manual entry of commands from the keyboard. And that'll reduce the likelihood of the human error through the using of the scripting and the automation. In addition, the team is looking at additional changes that could be made to the overall architecture of ForgeRock to increase the resiliency. And we're working with consortium as well as ForgeRock and AWS to understand if anything has to evolve on that architecture since it was implemented a year and a half ago. So I'll go ahead and move into the next incident if we go on. And so this is an instance that had to do with the report of sporadic performance slowness while navigating through the CalSAWS application and performing transactions on August 2nd and August 8th. The slowness was triggered through transaction logging caused by one of our jobs that typically runs during the batch process, but it was also repurposed to run during the course of the day. And so what we saw was that job running had a conflict with actual online users. So we had CalSAWS users in the system. And so what we're seeing was a conflict and a deadlock. And as a result, that caused the slowness in the system as other transactions backlogged behind it. That change was made as part of the 2207 release, and which is why we saw it arising during the 8.2 to 8.8 timeframe. That job has since been put on hold. Its purpose is for form rendering. And so those forms are still being rendered. They're just being rendered through the normal batch process that occurs during the nightly batch runs. This job was implemented with 2207 to turn it into, or to spread the load during the course of the day to relieve the pressure on the nightly batch process. So the underlying queries that caused the deadlocks have been remediated. There's more changes that are going to be made through the listed defects there. And as well as we're revisiting our performance testing procedures in order to do more of a combination of the newer event streaming architecture with the online, as well as the batch. So we're looking at more of that integrated performance testing, since we are seeing more of a hybrid architecture evolve on the CalSAWS platform. The final, if we move on to the next slide, the final issue occurred with our meds interface. And so that basically, the issue that was occurred, where it was on Tuesday night, the 26th, there was an incorrect process followed in the execution of the batch process that caused a series of meds transactions to be omitted from the file or to the interface file. They were subsequently sent to meds on 8/1, and we appreciate the help of our interface partners in identifying, mapping, and being able to apply that. So there was no impact to the end user community or the applicants, because these were transactions that had an effective date of September 1st. So we were able to resolve and pass that through. It was caused by an operational error in executing the execution of the batch in that event, to where the subsequent jobs were not put on hold. As a result, the jobs were run out of order, and the associated input file or input data was basically deleted by the underlying. And when I say deleted, it means it was omitted from the meds interface file. Team was able to recreate it through the process and the recovery. However, we are looking at the ways of if that job has to be put on hold in the future. Again, looking at it from an automation perspective of running the scripts or a batch job to automatically put holds on those underlying jobs to avoid the same issue. Well, in additional root cause, the whole reason why the jobs were being put on hold was because there was a higher volume than expected of transactions that were coming in, and so that was what was causing the jobs to elongate their runtime and cause other batch-related delays. That the decision was made to put that on hold to allow the rest of batch, including reporting, to be completed on time. So with that, we have identified potential opportunities on the onlines because the transactions in nature were basically a 10-year retroactive run of the online eligibility calculation that created the backflow of, or the backlog of large transactions. So we're looking at opportunities on how we can accommodate that in the future, either through a pop message or a warning to the end user on the impacts of running those 10 years of eligibility, as well as looking at the back end on the job as to how to re-architect it to hold to manage the spike in volume that actually occurred. So with all three of these, we're looking at the ways of drawing the automation as well as the upstream triggering events to reduce the likelihood of these going forward. So with that, I'll take a pause and turn it back to Michael for additional questions.
Arnold, I have some questions and I'll definitely open up to the other board members. I know on ForgeRock, I made comments in the last meeting about the importance of ForgeRock. It's the center of everything. So whatever redundancies we can put in place or things that we can do to ensure that we don't have a prolonged ForgeRock outage, I really like to see that going forward too. You talked about some of them here, but I still like to see what we're going to be doing because it's sort of the center, the nucleus of how all these systems come together, because it affects even the outside systems like OCAP. Everything's kind of going through.
That's right.
The other thing is on the batch, the second issue that you talked about, the batch and the deadlock with the users. That's one of the promises of the CalSAWS system and the LRS system was that batches could be run, during the day, that you didn't have to stick to batch windows at night. So I really want to see where you guys are headed on that to still preserve our ability to sort of spread out load without actually creating production impacts.
Yes.
And then the last one was meds. I thought there was two different meds issues. Then we had a meds recon issue, and then we had a daily issue after that. I don't know if that was specified in there.
So the one issue that was specified in here was where we had to do the manual intervention. The other was, again, long-running jobs that ultimately resulted in 2 days of meds transactions being transmitted on the following on that Friday of the same week.
Okay.
And so that
just brings back a little bit about batch windows, capabilities, when we can run them and not run them, and the overall scaling of the system for all the counties coming on board. All these batches are going to be getting bigger. So really like to hear your guys' strategy on dealing with that.
Yes, and what I will do is I will come back with future informational updates in the board in each of these upcoming months to give progress across what's happening with ForgeRock, as well as what we've committed to do is include informational sections around what our performance testing is doing to address specifically that point around how we continue to scale the system to handle the 58 counties. So I will be coming forward in future discussions to provide updates on all of those points.
And I want to be real transparent about it, because that's sort of one of the underpinnings of all 58 counties getting on one system is the scalability. So we need to be very knowledgeable about if we're running into some hiccups there and what's being done about it. I
Yes.
see Marla has her hand up, and then I see, Ori, you're off mic with your, would that be questions coming from you?
It does, and I'm looking for the hand up, so I'll put my mute.
I'll go to Sayori first then, Marla.
No, I do apologize. So I'm not a technical person and I'm trying to follow this conversation. And I know that there's been a couple of times that we've talked about performance testing. So as the volume continues to increase, which we know will happen, how do you performance test for volume?
So the way we handle that is in the current process, we have online performance test as well as batch. And the way that we do that is we take the production database with the volumes. So for example, right now we are currently performance testing with wave 1 data. So it's current production plus YOLO and Placer County data that came out of the mock conversions that are occurring right now. So we're taking the data off of the Gainwell system, converting it and loading it onto a CalSAWS system that has current production load of 40 counties. And then we go through and run the batch, as well as simulated online transaction volumes against that database with that load on it. We will continue to increase that load as additional counties go through that mock conversion process. And so, and then as far as modeling the load, we're modeling that based upon current size, number of cases of the existing counties, as well as the existing production. Plus we add a certain amount as additional buffer for peak performance. And so that's what we execute or are in process of executing for our wave 1 counties. We'll be starting to do that with the wave 2 loads within the next several weeks after we complete the first run of the conversion data for those wave 2 counties. And we will continue to scale the performance test accordingly.
So Arnold, there's 2 other folks with hands up, but I want to just get to Sayori's question a little bit more succinctly. If there's a way for you to explain it with a little bit less technical pieces. Are you guys making changes? Are you guys making changes to the performance testing that will help us better prepare for things coming up in the future than what we had, that maybe there's some performance testing pieces to any of these?
Yes, so we are. So the answer is yes, we are looking at the performance testing in this case for the production incidents that we talked about. There's more overlap of running those streaming components that run during the day on top of the online performance environment. So that's modeling what's happening during the course of the day. So it's basically all the transactions that are coming in. We're putting that on the test system load in order to identify where those bottlenecks are. There's a series of other changes that we're making based upon those tests to further or to make further tuning adjustments to the team to the system to handle the load.
So Arnold, just to hop in real quick. So yes, we're making those adjustments. I think you've highlighted them at a high level, but the transparency, we got the action item. You're going to be coming in to the next couple of meetings and talk about those scaling of the system on technical areas and what the results of those are. Your regional managers have also requested that we specifically with our green light materials as we head to each one of the waves and in our status reporting, segment off the performance tests so that we could look, so those things aren't just embedded into the risks and those types of things, that it's a separate, deliberate discussion about that scaling. So we'll bring them back here. We're going to be looking at our weekly status report on segmenting those out and making sure that they're part of our green light process that all of the counties are aware of going forward. So there's transparency to this highly technical area as well.
I appreciate that, John, and we're going to pay real good attention to it because I think this is critical. This is all a part about this system scaling for 58. Marla has her hand up and then on.
Thank you, Michael. So I just do want to jump in here also to express my concurrence about how important this is. and that we just can't, crash when we get to all 58 counties. So here's some of the thoughts that I have based on what you presented today. And thank you, Arnold, for your presentation. I think it's great that we're having these conversations now because we're kind of practicing, right? Practicing to have the conversations here, practicing to kind of ingest it, understand it, because we're going to see more probably, right? So I think this is great that we're setting up this practice and the structure of after action reports, if you will. One of the things I liked that I heard from you is this effort to replace human processes with automated processes. Automated processes which are pre-coded. So presumably the coding has been through a lot of review. Humans, they sit down to do something. Nobody, you can't really predict what they're going to do necessarily. So I think that automated processes over human processes are really important. I also really liked how you have a focus on the impact on clients, and that's super important. That's the most important thing here is the impact on clients. At the same time, when our system goes down, because everything we do is on our system, when our system goes down, it's an enormous efficiency hit to counties. And I think as part of, I'm suggesting as part of the after action analyses, if we can quantify the cost to counties. If we go down across the state for an hour, it's a huge cost to counties because pretty much all of our staff are on the system all the time. So I think it'd be helpful to quantify the costs just for us to get a collective understanding of what that cost to an outage is, because maybe that helps us to think about upfront investments to prevent outages. Like what's the level of investments we would want to make to prevent this kind of efficiency cost loss when we have outages. So thank you for the really good conversation and giving us a chance to really reflect on it.
Yes, and thank you for that input. We'll work on the consortium to help identify that and be able to bring that dimension to future discussions.
Yeah, you could just put out
very much.
CRFIs afterwards to counties and ask them to, just respond with, number of staff that were out, what their classifications were, and what the cost is for those classifications.
Yep.
Thank you, Marla. On? Did he drop? I know he had his hand up.
No. So I do. I just forgot to put myself on mute. But thank you, Arnold, and thank you, John. I look forward to getting more information from the action item that's going to be. Some specific question I had was, as you scale up, as the capacity is going to increase, has that already been built in as part of your technology, either hardware or software licensing and your budget in order to anticipate that additional capacity that's going to go up?
Absolutely. As we went through and did our APDs and our planning and our scaling, all of those things have been included in, as well as the services to be able to support them as we go through. So that's why we have incrementally been going through and doing these tests, and the tests and providing that and the services to be able to do that are proving out where those items are. And what we're doing is bringing transparency when the test and what's been in production haven't synced up, or there's been a manual issue that's there, bringing that transparency and then the corrective action plan. But the short answer to your question is yes, it is built into our budget, both from a hardware, software, AWS hosting, as well as the services to be able to do that. And then we come back when we're having issues associated with that, if what we estimated isn't coming in with reality and what we're seeing in tests, or correcting the test to say, how did that get through? And we have that. So that's what Arnold's doing today. And that's what we're going to go back and make sure that we bring here, and we bring to each one of those go live meetings on how did it test, how did it scale, and if there were any production issues, how are you preventing that as we further expand? Arnold, anything you want to add to that?
Well, and I think you're exactly right. And the other component that we do is we keep track of the actual production volumes that are coming through, the number of transactions, the number of records, and we compare that to the performance results so that we're using that also as a way to further improve the accuracy of those performance tests based upon what we're seeing in actual production. And also in some cases, production introduces different transaction types or combinations that have to be added to that performance test suite of cases so that we are more accurate with the performance testing and rely on those results as the system continues to scale.
Yeah, and Arnold, you mentioned during the presentation that the 22.07 release was done in part to lighten the load on the nightly batch. Is there an issue in terms of the bandwidth of batching nightly that precipitated that change?
No, that was actually done in preparation for the 58 counties. So what we've seen is over the last 4 months, monthly batch continues to finish earlier as a result of all the performance changes that we had. And we had, up until these incidents, we had 4 months without a batch service level miss. So we're actually shortening those batch run times on the current system in preparation for the increasing volume that we will see as the other counties are converted on.
Okay,
So,
Arnold, let me maybe hop in and give maybe us a little bit different flavor to the answer for on. We knew that the existing system with the existing counties had to be changed in order to accommodate the expansion for the Calhoun counties to come on. There was some jobs that we have for interfaces and things like that, that at the end of the day, there would be a technical job to sweep the entire database and build then build an interface file. We've had to change the architecture on some of those longer jobs to avoid that sweep and to build that interface job throughout the day, stream that information and build it to avoid those things. Those are some of the changes that are going in and getting tested to be able to then scale the system for the additional volume. Then what Arnold talked about is taking your converted data and then running against those jobs with the data that's there for the production counties and do that on top. So some of those things, yes, have been planned and are being done to be able to scale that. And that's how we do that incrementally and bring in those changes. And Arnold, correct me if I've put something in there that needs to clean up on that.
no, that is completely accurate. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Arnold and John, for taking this seriously. We all know that scalability is at the root of our success. So we're going to keep on looking for updates on how that's being dealt with. Any other questions or comments from our board members or our state partners on this presentation?
Hi, good afternoon. This is Katie Mead from DHCS. I had a super quick question in regards to the transactions not hitting meds. I understand at least based on the slide that it was CalFresh cases or nutritional benefit cases. Wanting to confirm that this wouldn't, or let me rephrase, that additional testing was done to confirm that it was, if it included any other programs as well that had transactions not hitting to meds. I know that I heard that you had recreated it and were able to test that, but wanting to see if that testing included other programs as well.
Yes, we scanned across all programs for any transactions that were missed.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate. Any other questions or comments from our state partners or our board members on this? Okay, that's a very robust discussion. Any public comment? All right, I think we can go ahead and move on our agenda. Arnold, thank you.
Thank you.
CalSAWS release and policy. Oh, Roxana's favorite part of the meeting.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So just some quick highlights that we wanted to cover. Many of these may sound familiar from last month. We just wanted to give you a preview of the key items that are coming up this month as well as next month. So as mentioned previously, we do have a couple of runs this weekend. We have our emergency allotment for the CalFresh program. That's a monthly process we continue to run through the PHE that will run Saturday night, along with for LA County, there's a clothing allowance job that we run specific to the child welfare programs there for LA County. As we move into September, we will run the emergency allotment process again in early September. And then on the 10th of September, we have our annual CalFresh COLA, as well as the CalWorks MAP increase. So a couple of highlights here. When the slides were put together, we were anxiously awaiting all the COLA values from our federal and state partners. We did receive the majority of those values earlier this week. We await a subset specific to the Sualua, the standard limited and telephone utility allowances, working very closely to get those. The goal here, as we may have stated in other meetings, is that we really are driving to implement and run the COLA in both CalWIN and CalSAWS prior to that wave 1 migration. So we are pushing to try to get the values into the system in a couple of weeks. We know the October benefit month will open up at the end of this month, and then run those batch processes in both systems to affect the change across the impacted CalFresh CalWorks households. So at the moment, on track with our current plan. As we the days click by, and we are measuring this plan in days at this point, if there are any material changes or we have delays into the end of next week regarding those values, and this plan may change slightly, and additional communication will go out. After the 10th, the 19th, we do have, there's a CalHERS release going into the system, as well as the wave 1 county prep cutover activities. So that is right around the corner. And then at the end of September, we have our CalSAWS September release. And let's go to the next slide, please. Quick highlights on 2209. It is a somewhat of a smaller release than we've seen this year. Earlier this year, we did have some very large releases as we were implementing some additional capabilities for our CalWIN counties in readiness for the UAT exercise that is currently ongoing. So 2209 is a little bit smaller. We do have some policy items going in, as documented here on this slide, and then again with 2211, more policy items. We also have a large number of correspondence items that are going into the system, whether that be current updates for existing correspondence. We have a lot of translation work going on as well, and going into the system in the coming months. And that's just some quick highlights. Karen, if you're out there, did you want to add anything to these 2 slides?
No, you covered it. Lisa, thank you.
Thank you. I think that's it, the end of the slides.
So just a reminder to everyone with the COLAs coming up to get your cases in a ready to run ADVC mode. Remember, manual issuance mode will not process. So we need to make sure all the cases are ready to run. We have a lot of exceptions otherwise. So just a reminder out there. Any questions or comments about that presentation? It was quick and to the point. Not hearing any from our state partners or our board members. How about public comment? Okay, thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Karen. We'll go ahead and move on to the next item.
All right, next item is update on key risks. So Rachel will be joining me here as we go through this. And last month we had committed that we would modify the format of these to include a view of how we're doing on wave 1, which is immediately in front of us, as well as wave 2 through 6. So there's a bit of a change in the format from what you're used to seeing as we take this forward and show that status on a wave 1. So we'll start out with risk number 258, and this is the Calwin conversion cutover window, is at risk of completing past the 84-hour cutover window. And for wave 1, with our latest mock cutover that completed this past week, we are within the 84-hour window. We are at 81 to 82 hours right now. And so from that perspective, we are looking good for those wave 1 counties. On wave 2 through 6, we will be running that conversion process. So a little bit later, you'll be hearing CalSAWS talk about Golden Dataset 8.5, which is basically a combination of the wave 1 conversion plus the wave 2 counties on top of that. And so from there, we'll start getting the timing around where we are with that conversion window. That is why we left this as a red. We are awaiting the results of those first set of conversion runs to confirm if we're within the 84-hour window, and action items if we're falling outside of that window. If we move on to the next slide, please. So next is around 263, and that is unresolved high priority conversion defects are going unresolved prior to the wave 1 go live, and the impact that could have on the case workers. So where we are on 263 with wave 1 is the fact that we have 0 P1s currently active. There are 4 P2s that have been identified that are currently going through triage, with the rest of those at P2s that are already targeted to be resolved either prior to or with the wave 1 go live. With those 4 that are in triage, they were identified within the UAT. We expect to see more that are potentially surfaced as a result of UAT or future mock cutovers, and we will continue to track those closely. And just as a calibration, what a P2 is a priority 2, those are material issues that lack workarounds and could have an impact on worker productivity and ability to process transactions. And so with those, the target is to have 0 of those, and we believe we will meet that with our wave 1 counties. Priority 3 all have alternative work methods, and those are being included in training materials, additional communications, etc., for any that will be in the system post that wave 1 go live. And so there's a very thorough process of vetting those across our consortium, the counties, the participants, in order to make sure we have appropriate impact analysis on those. So where we're staying with wave 1 is we're trending positive towards green as a result of having 0 P1s, minimal P2s. Those that are P2s have line of sight of resolution prior to the wave 1 go live. If we move on to the next risk.
Hey, Arnold, just going back to the other risk, and for our green light process as we go through here on the P3s, so the ones that do have an alternate procedure, there will be transparency brought to those on what they are, because we know that, you know, if there is enough of them, that it does impact operations. So we'll make sure that there's transparency, and the ISS team is will be preparing the counties as we go through that, and as we can track the retirement of those alternate procedures as we go through that. So again, those were trending well on the highest priorities, and we know those lower priorities or quick modification of work procedures, if there's enough of them, could be impactful, and we'll be transparent with those as we go into the go live decisions.
That's correct, John. And we're continuing to look at ways to accelerate the closure of all those defects prior to conversion as well. So with 268, I'll transition over to Rachel.
Thanks, Arnold. 268, just reminding folks that 268 is our overarching risk that we are using to monitor all of the children risks that Arnold and I are discussing this afternoon. This is the risk that we're using also, that in the event that any one of those children risks results in a need to execute a contingency option, that we have a contingency plan that has been defined. I wanted to make one note on where we stand relative to 268. So we do have our plan in place. There are the individual mitigation strategies for the children risks, if you will. Since the time that this presentation had been developed to today, we are actually at a state of amber for risk 268 because all of the children risks are at a state of amber as well. So we are trending in the right direction with 268. Arnold, I believe I'll turn it back to you for the next risk. If we could go to the next slide for 269.
So on 269 on the Calhoun counties, this is having enough development time and testing for refactoring their ad hoc reports and ancillary systems before go live. So if we take a look at where we are on wave one, this is still red as there is still work to be done for the counties. Placer has 1, Yolo has 39 ad hoc reports to refactor respectively. And on that, we are leaning in shoulder to shoulder with the counties, answering the questions for them as they work on those reports. They believe that they have a path to complete that prior to the cutover window in the event, and we are still supporting as necessary to help them with that. With waves 2 and wave 3, we are continuing to work with all the counties around the inventory of reports that are available through the system, as well as if that inventory of base reports are insufficient, then the alternative means of satisfying that up to and including the ad hoc process. So we're working on the wave 2 counties. So we have 8 out of the 10 ad hoc support curriculum has been completed for our counties. And so those are the discussions in walking through the actual reports and how they map. And we are continuing to work with them, again, leaning in with those sessions with the experts to help them through that. And we're starting that process for wave 3 as well. So making progress. Yes.
On the wave 1, I think it's important for the board to know that if the county can't complete all of those ad hoc reports, some of these could go post go live, and they'll make that assessment on whether they all have to be pre or post and work through that. So just because this is red doesn't mean that it is an item that's necessary for go live. That's up to the counties to be able to prioritize the one they have. And as Arnold said, we're working with them shoulder to shoulder on their most critical ones, but there might not be able to remediate all of those items, and some of them may go post go live, and we'll keep tracking those with those impacted counties.
Thank you, John. Let's move on to the next.
I've got this one,
So-
Arnold, 270. Yeah, so 270 is tracking the progress for the change discussion guides for each of the waves. From last month to this month, we actually have moved to a position of amber with the change discussion guides for the wave 1 counties. The wave 1 counties have initiated their discussions using the change discussion guides with their staff. So we are now in a state of monitoring the progression of the wave 1 counties in those discussions and incorporating feedback if there are things that need to be clarified. So we're keeping this in a monitoring state, which is why it's staying at an amber state at this juncture. Last JPA, we talked about that wave 2 and wave 3 counties were trending behind for the change discussion guides, having received some additional comments and some comments not having been addressed by the ISS team in the final work products that were provided to the counties from wave 2 specifically. So since that point of time for wave 2, this morning, I just got an update from the team that they have incorporated all of the comments for Santa Clara County and will be turning that change discussion guide around. Tulare is in the final approval stage of the final deliverable, having addressed the consortium and the QA comments for Tulare. And Contra Costa, there is a need to have a follow-up conversation with the county to clarify some of the comments that we had received from the county. So the team has addressed those that they were able to, but we are going to be meeting with Contra Costa to walk through those comments and make sure that we can bring those to closure. After the comment resolution period for the change discussion guides for Wave 2, we will be following the same approach for the Wave 1 counties, which is to conduct a kickoff session and an orientation session to help the counties with understanding how they can apply those change discussion guide conversations within their counties, and then move towards conducting sessions with managers and supervisors, and then we'll get into a monitoring stage. And that same will take place with the Wave 3 counties as well. So both of those are trending behind right now for Wave 2 and 3. If we could go to the next slide. 272, this one, Arnold, I'll turn back to you.
Yeah, so 272 has to do with the network connectivity between CalSAWS and, in this case, Santa Clara County. So for Wave 1, if you recall, last month we were talking about Placer County and an upgrade of their firewalls. That has been completed, and we are back on track with our Wave 1 counties. So we are green from a Wave 1 perspective. On Wave 2 with Santa Clara, we are expecting AT&T to actually be out at Santa Clara today to be doing the implementation of that. So we will provide a status back on where we are with that implementation of that network connection with the AT&T vendor on future. But for now, it remains as a red risk until we are able to get that resolved. We move on to the next. So on 275, this is around our tech readiness, and I've talked about the Placer County, so we're green there. We can move on to the next. And with that, Mike, I can transition it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Arnold. Thank you, Rachel. Any comments or questions from our board members on those risk areas that were presented? I like the colors that are going more towards green.
Yes.
But we're still in some yellow status on several of them that are concerning, and still some reds that are concerning that we got to keep on. I see Adam's hand up, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Adam for his question or comment.
Yeah, no question. Just a comment. I really just want to say I appreciate this, the tracking wave by wave with the county specificness. It just gives a lot of clarity. You know, these different wave rollouts present a lot of opportunities for, as you've highlighted here, changes, things that we don't internally control and have our hands wrapped around as with other things. And so I just want to say I really appreciate the diligence and the obvious quickness in responding to these things as they pop up, because I don't expect anyone to keep them from popping up, but they look like they're being handled great, and it gives me a lot of assurance. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from our board members or state partners? Okay, any public comment? All right, great. Thank you for the transparency, the presentation, and the progress being made, Arnold, Rachel, and John. So we can move on to the next item, which is, I believe, conversion. Everyone's favorite topic.
It is, thank you. So good afternoon, everybody. As Arnold just mentioned, this past week, we did just complete the mock cutover number 2 for Wave 1. As he mentioned, it does result, or did result in golden data set number 8.5. And once again, the golden data set really represents the converted data that then gets delivered to the project. And so as a result of that, what we'll do is we'll use that for our next run, which is right around the corner, and we'll put Wave 2 on top of that. And then at that point, it starts to give us more of the timings with respect to how long it takes to convert Wave 2. So still more things. I know we just talked about that risk respectively, but kind of put some things in the context here. The numbers that we have here are just before the start of the mock cutover. We have new numbers right now. We're currently assessing those numbers, but what we're seeing is they are consistent with what we saw just leading into the actual cutover itself. So some context here in terms of the numbers, there's a little bit of accounting that's going on. We like to do that. So we're converting in about 100,000 active programs. And we'll run all those programs through the auto case review. It's been called EDBC match in the past. And the result of that is the removal of yellow banner cases or programs. We run it at a program level. Essentially, we try to report it on up at a case level, although that has the program level information in there as well. What we experience with this is that we see about 31,000. This is obviously wave one, placer in yellow. We see about 31,000 records that show up or programs that show up on the case review report. What that means is those remain as yellow banner cases. Now, after having conversations with various counties, and in particular at a management site visit just recently, what we've heard is those Medi-Cal programs that are protected by the PHE, those are really deprioritized, and those will be worked at a later time when the PHE is lifted and the unwind begins. And they'll be worked on as their renewals come due. So what that then does is it leaves the remaining about 8,600 programs that will need to be reviewed by placer and YOLO respectively. And then furthermore, we've broken it down between SSI income and review by redetermination date. And the rationale for that was we do have a Social Security COLA coming right around the corner after we go live. I think that's going to be in the middle of December. And so we want to put a prioritization on that. And then the remainder of those, and consistent with what we've heard from counties, is they plan to review these by the redetermination date as well. So the remaining 6,900 would be reviewed by on their RE date. So really what that tells us here is that about 9% of the converted active programs, those will require some review by the caseworkers. What we're also doing, and we actually have already done this with, I believe we've done this so far with placer, is sit down with them and explain these numbers so that they have an understanding of what they mean and put it in the context for them so that they can then prepare their staff on just how they want to action these cases and respectively these programs. So we just want to bring this to light during this session. I believe we'll continue to bring it to JPAs as we lead up to go live, as we recognize that this is a critical piece to the go live. And with that, I'll pause, Michael, and send it back to you and see if there are questions.
All right, thanks, Keith. This was a briefer than usual presentation on conversion, so we're getting tighter, so that's good. We're getting closer to having a nice golden data set and everything working well. I do want to open it up to our other board members, state partners, particularly any of the Calhoun County directors that are on here, if they have any comments or questions about this. All starts with conversion. Nice beard, by the way, Keith.
Thank you.
All right, any public comment? All right, I think we'll go ahead and move on.
Michael, I do have a question.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, if you could say who's speaking, because I can't see.
Jennifer Tracy from the Advocate Group.
Thank you, Jennifer. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to catch you before you moved on. So one of the questions that we had was if there are trends about what types of cases are most likely to be flagged as yellow banner cases. And I'm wondering if, from what I've seen, if it's SSI cases and Medi-Cal cases, or can you speak to that?
We actually do the inverse. So try not to get into too many details, but when we start the conversion, we flag every case with a yellow banner, and it's really at the program level, but it's the case. And through these processes that we're seeing here, that I'm talking about here, we work to remove the yellow banner, because what we want to be able to do is reduce the amount of work on the caseworker. So we're not necessarily looking for trends that add to the yellow banner. We're looking for trends that would reduce the yellow banner.
We could take the action item. We know what cases through our test runs have yellow banner cases and what are the conditions associated with that. We've brought those to other public meetings, and I think as we come to future meetings, we can show what are those things and what are the characteristics of the yellow banner and how do they do that. So I think it was talked about a little bit today in regards to Medi-Cal cases and the PHE. And we know that the counties are going to have to deal with those, and we're going to be working with the ISS team on that. And we can comment on what is the nature of the yellow banner cases that we find as a trend. I think we've done that in other meetings, and we can update that as we get closer.
That's correct, John. We have all the data, and it all exists in the case review report. And just one side note on the case review report, as we've been having some discussions with the counties, they did ask if we can add some additional columns to that report so it'd be more useful to them. And as of this last run, we've added one more, which is the reporting type code. We heard that it would be helpful for them to understand the SAR-7 dates, and so that will help them understand that. So,
and I think the important thing is the reason that we're highlighting the SSI related cases is because the SSI COLA is coming up, and we want to be able to make sure that those are highlighted to be worked prior to the COLA being applied so that the system does that and there is less manual intervention that's required of a worker. So that's why we sort of tease those out and highlight them.
And I would assume there's some overlap between why a case doesn't run EDBC prior to a COLA to why it doesn't convert during conversion. So Jen, we do have that information. We do have a breakout in trending. So we'll make sure that that's actually shared at least at an anecdotal level in the next meeting.
Thank you. And John, thanks for kind of summarizing what I was getting at. And if there are places I can go to just research that, I'm happy to be directed to the right spot. Thank you.
Great. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Hearing none. Thank you, Keith. Appreciate the detailed update, and we'll move along to the next item.
thank you.
Catherine, you out there?
Hey, Michael, this is Duncan. I'll be presenting.
Oh, Duncan's going to do it. Thanks, Duncan.
No problem. Thank you, John. So in terms of our overall readiness for wave one, you can see where we're tracking. There's a lot of key activities that are underway in terms of conversion, UAT execution. We're well into group 2 UAT execution. Interface partner testing is wrapping up. We are continuing with our OCM activities, including change discussions and our final surveys. Training is well underway. From an implementation standpoint, we've been monitoring the work plan and checklist for several months now, and are looking towards county prep. And from a technical standpoint, we are wrapping up our technical readiness and making sure from a network and hardware perspective, and you know, making sure that the county is ready to go in terms of all facilities and connectivity with the project. I think we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So overall, if you look at our readiness areas and overall buckets of you know, various readiness categories, from an application perspective, we are tracking, we are green and tracking to where we need to be for wave one. For integration, as I touched on before, the key activity that we're working on with both our state partners and with counties is the interface partner test and then testing, and that is on track as well for both Placer and YOLO. From a convergent perspective, the convergent team continues to work through defect resolution and refine where we're at with EDBC match. From a technical standpoint, no red flags in terms of network connectivity, and performance testing is also well underway. If you go to the next slide, please. Across the additional readiness areas, so for training, training is well underway and progressing well. The feedback that we're getting from counties is that the training is resonating. our Calhoun counties are appearing to be well prepared and grasping the CalSAWS system as we would hope and expect at this stage of migration readiness. In terms of organization, we did highlight that, so the change discussion guides, the materials have been delivered, the prep sessions have been conducted. We're meeting with the primary points of contact on a weekly basis, and counties are progressing through those discussions. Their supervisors are holding those discussions with their staff. We are trending slightly behind, but the counties are aware of what they need to do and are confident that they will be able to have those discussions and communicate that material effectively to get that both the materials for the change discussion guides and the content well communicated through their training and prior, as much as they can prior to their training, but that material will get into the hands of their users timely. In terms of implementation, we're trending yellow on a couple things. So one is from last month, we were a bit behind in terms of our implementation support plan deliverable. We've made great strides on that. The deliverable has been resubmitted and is going through final approval. We are right now have 3 primary strike teams that are focused on the command center structure, the communications that'll be managed throughout the post-go live period, as well as all the resources that are going to be provided by the project and potentially other counties to support our Wave 1 counties when they go live. And those are coming to conclusion in the next couple of weeks. And we have kickoffs planned with our Wave 1 counties to communicate that information. We also have the Go Live packet, which is a suite of information that'll be provided to all Wave 1 users when they go live. And that's going through its final refinement. We're also going to be seeking some feedback from counties in terms of we want to give them as much robust information as we can, but also make sure it's usable. So there's some targeted meetings that we're going to have and bringing some county staff in to review that and make sure that it's what we're hitting the mark in terms of giving as much data as we can to our Wave 1 counties when they go live and to guide them through that initial 30 to 60 day period, but also make sure that it's consumable. We could go to the next slide, please. So overall, from a county readiness perspective, although we do have some yellows as noted on the prior slide, we're trending green in all major areas from county readiness. So I know we mentioned where we were with ad hoc reporting, for example. The project is really dove in with YOLO and is helping them get where they need to be in terms of that ad hoc refactoring. So from a county perspective, we're still green there. From an implementation standpoint, although we still have some ground to make up in terms of the post-implementation structure, we don't believe it's going to have an impact on the county. We're still on track to deliver, to communicate what that structure is going to be and make sure that the counties get at least the resources they request, if not more, to support them post-implementation. So the impact to county readiness should be addressed, and they should still be green from that perspective. And then from the CDGs, although they're trending a little bit behind, both counties have indicated confidence that they'll be able to get that information out to their users timely as they prepare to go live. So overall, that's where we're at from an overall executive and project readiness standpoint, as well as county readiness. Michael, I will turn it back to you.
So thank you, Duncan. This has been an area of focus definitely for the project right now and for all of us as board members. So I kind of want to understand a little bit more about what has changed a little bit in the areas. We were struggling with the change discussion guides in the past of being targeted and well suited for the Calhoun counties. And I also want to encourage the directors or Calhoun County directors on here to basically speak up whether they think that these greens and yellows are representative, because if they're not, I really want to have an alignment on what progress has been made from the last meetings that we've been looking at this to now, and whether the directors out there are feeling it and seeing it. So can you kind of tell me what has changed? Because the colors have changed, but I want to know kind of what has changed on the ground.
Absolutely. So the first thing you mentioned, Michael, was the change discussion guide. So I'm happy to talk through that. So there were some things we needed to work through in the change discussion guides in terms of getting the documentation where it needed to be, and making sure that we got to a place where the consortium QA team project and county all were aligned on the level of detail and the kinds of data that was being captured in the change discussion guides. And I think we got there, and we're in a very good spot for wave one. So we did catch up from that perspective, and we have a really good base to work from for subsequent waves. In terms of getting, enabling the counties, we've also had really productive discussions for the county, the prep sessions for change discussions. I think the time that maybe was lost in getting to where we needed to be in the documentation and the delay to the prep sessions, has given the counties a little less time than we would have hoped to go have those discussions with their staff. But, that's been the overall progression from last month to this month as it relates to the change discussion guides.
Well, we know change management is all about understanding the as is and to be's and really knowing where they're headed. And there was a little bit of gray area around that earlier, whether or not it was articulated well enough for them to understand what change, how much the change is and what they have to do about it. So is that gap closing?
Yeah, I definitely believe it is, Michael. So we've, I think we got to a really good place with the wave one change discussion guides. The feedback from the counties has been positive on them, as well as the consortium and QA team are, are happy with where we have, where we are with both YOLO and Placer. And it's really given us a base to work from in terms of the level of detail, the kind, the pull in from all the changes that have happened from Cal 1 to CalSAWS, the unique distinction based on county business process for both YOLO and Placer. And one of the things that we're doing moving forward to waves 2 and 3 as a lesson learned is we have a really solid base of a master CDG that we've developed, and we kind of know where the specific configurable parts are, where we would insert where the county business process implications are going to be inserted. But we have, let's say, 65% of that common consistent content, and then we're able to work in the specific business process implications from county to county. So we're driving consistency with the overall level of detail, but also giving ample space to work in the county specific nuances into those guides.
Okay, thanks for that extended explanation. And I'm going to go ahead and I want to turn it over to our other board members and state partners, particularly any of our Cal 1 board members who would like to provide comment or ask any further questions, because I know this is near and dear to your guys' heart. So.
Hey, Michael, this is on from
thank
county.
you.
I don't have any specific questions or comment, but my staff indicated that we are looking forward to getting feedback on the change discussion guides. I know that timeline has been pushed back and ours is going to be in early September. So we're eagerly awaiting that as well. And hopefully we'll be able to get some more information.
Absolutely, on, and I know that communication, I believe, just went out this morning, and happy that we were able to solidify the timeline for wave 3. We're looking forward to those change discussions, and I think we have a lot of great lessons we've learned with waves 1 and 2 that we'll be able to carry forward to wave 3.
And on definitely press on our own teams to use that time wisely, because it really is an opportunity to dig in and provide specifics that we could have the project and our vendor partners chasing down for you. I know that sometimes a little bit of time element can get used well, or it could get used, just as a time delay. But this would be really opportunistic to jump on it. Any other folks? I know Marla definitely would have some comments, right? So I would invite them. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Just wanted to say that I'll definitely check in with my team about what the delay is in getting back to you on our change discussion guide. So I noted that. Thank you. I think the progress on the change discussion guides is really encouraging. I thought that was, I appreciated what I heard there. I like that you think you've got about 65% real solid base content. And then you kind of know where the 40% or so is, where counties are going to have their unique processes. I think that's a real, that's a real jump forward, I think, for the change discussion guide. So that's great news. I'll be really interested to see as we come into phase or wave 2, how much you find the complexity is different from county to county. So we have 2 counties right now in wave 1, and it'll be interesting to see as we go forward how, if that 60-40 kind of stays the same, And then for that 40 that's county specific, how much complexity is involved there and how much time is needed by the counties to kind of understand that and incorporate that. But mostly I want to say this is, I think, really great progress. Thank you.
Marla, one thing just to note, if you think about moving from wave 1 to wave 2, we're at the place where the counties in wave 2 are going to be interfacing directly with CalSAWS, and we don't have, other than fiscal, we don't have that in wave 1. So that's going to be something that will be different for the first time with the wave 2 counties. So aside from that 40%, that's something that we're really taking a look at, because that's the piece that I know that the counties are really interested in, is understanding the ancillary system integration with CalSAWS.
Yeah. Good, thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up, Rachel, because we really want to be transparent on what may not be able to be fully tested out of a pilot for the wave 2 and beyond counties. So calling those out in the meetings, I think, will be important as we move forward.
Perfect.
Any other comments or questions from our board members out there? I'm calling on my Calwin directors out there. This isn't your only chance, but I want to give you the opportunity. All right, I'm going. All right, I'm not hearing any further comments. I'm going to open for public comment on this.
Hi, this is Jennifer Tracy from the Advocates Group. Just, I don't know how much this is totally related, but thinking about the readiness and the WBT training, has there been training on Benefits Cal and how to support consumers using Benefits Cal as part of the training for workers, or will that be part of the training so that as consumers are calling when Benefits Cal is available to them to get support, that the workers will be prepared to help them?
The short answer, Jen, is yes. The training it's not a web-based training, but there actually is training that we're conducting with the counties and with the county help desks for helping people if they were to call in. So there are sessions planned with the counties. They're going to occur roughly about the same time, if not a little bit earlier than the community-based organization training sessions as well.
Okay, were those provided previously or are those new?
They were provided previously as well.
Okay, is it possible to see just a summary of the content that's provided so that we understand like what workers are expected to be able to help people with?
I can take that back as an action item from this board meeting, Jen.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thank you for that comment, Jen. Very important to include Benefits Cal and everything we're doing. Any other comments before we go close this out? Okay. All right, then hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item. Thank you, Duncan. Thank you, Rachel. And I appreciate the comments from our board members and the public.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sir Ranjan. Peggy is not available today, so I'll give you a quick update on where we are at with UAT. So as you know, UAT Group 2 execution is in progress. Group 1 and Group 2 are just two separation of application functionality. Group 1 has finished. What you're seeing right now is scheduled for Group 2, which is ending on August 22nd. Next slide, please. Amazing participation. All 18 Calvin counties have participated. More than 180 testers are currently testing 585 plus scenarios that are part of this Group 2. Main item is being tested is GAGR, Medi-Cal CMSP, child welfare scenarios, fiscal, and report. And so far, we have got good participation and good feedback from the testers as to how the system is working for them. Next slide, please. So the next two slides, you will see the status of where Group 1 and Group 2 executions have been. As I said earlier, Group 1 execution has finished. It finished on July 22nd. 100% of scenarios have been executed with 85% pass rate. The failed and blocked scenarios are due to script errors, which are being fixed. but there is no significant system functionality error that has showed up. Anything that has come up as a finding from a UAT user has been shared with the ISS team and the application development team for further analysis and see what next steps need to be taken, whether it is a new change or enhancement to their training or other implementation related documentation. So that part is being worked on as I speak. Next slide, please. Lastly, we are currently, as we speak, we are in the third week of execution for UAT for Group 2. We have till August 22nd to finish all the scenarios. We are slightly ahead of schedule when in terms of execution. In next 2 weeks, we do anticipate all the scenarios to be executed and completed. That's pretty much what I have, and I'll hand it over to you, Michael, for any questions.
Any questions or comments from our board members on UAT? Participation levels high. Hopefully we're getting good product out of it and being able to make the changes necessary to ensure a quality product. Any comments, any questions from our board members or our state partners? Okay, hearing none. Any public comment on this? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on. Thank you, Sarajan.
Thanks, Michael.
Much appreciated.
All right, if I can find the unmute button here. Okay, benefits Cal, we have 4 topics to talk about, and I want to be cognizant of time. So last month, if folks recall correctly, we went through where benefits Cal was relative to the formality that is associated with final acceptance. So just wanted to bring back an update from this group relative to where we landed last month around final acceptance for benefits Cal. So we are at the stage that phase 1 implementation for all requirements have been completed. We have done the successful cutover. We have concluded with our post-implementation support period, which if folks recall, we had 2 of them, one for Los Angeles and one for the C4 counties. So there was actually multiple post-implementation periods for acceptance. And we have corrected the deficiencies that were identified during that time period and corrected them and they have been deployed at this juncture. So from an acceptance update, the items that we have relative to all of the things that we needed to complete have been done for benefits Cal. If we could move to the next slide. There was an ask about providing disaggregated data for a number of things for benefits Cal. So owner's going to give a little bit of a highlight of some of the information. There's a lot of content, but owner's going to walk through a couple of these items.
Thank you, Rachel. Good afternoon, everyone. As Rachel mentioned, we took the action item from the previous JPA meeting to provide details on the disaggregated production metrics. And in the interest of time, I will quickly touch on some of these highlights this afternoon for you. So from the application standpoint, we received 835,000 applications since go live. And in the big picture, and the graphic here shows that some counties have higher volume than the others. And from the big picture standpoint, when we look at the distribution here, the applications that have been submitted by county aligns with what we would expect based off the size of the population or the county size. So we see higher volume applications submitted coming from the larger counties. It aligns pretty much with that. Next slide, please. As it relates to the number of applications by platform, this graphic briefly outlines the breakdown of applications submitted through Benefits Call versus the Get Call Fresh. And the ratio on the graphic that you see here stayed pretty consistent on a monthly basis across the board and consistent with what we have seen before. One quick maybe something to keep in mind that the benefits call has not been aggressively marketed earlier and does not have an outreach effort. That being said, though, we do have a marketing campaign coming up in September, and we will be monitoring the impact of the marketing campaign on the adoption of the benefits call as we move forward. Can we move to the next slide, please? So from the, if you look at this application data, CBO versus customer here, it is pretty in alignment with the previous slide for the get coverage. So I won't spend too much time on this one. We see a consistent pattern across the board for CBO versus customer. Next slide, please. So from the renewals type and the months standpoint, out of 158,000 renewals that we have received since go live, we see a pattern here that we received more renewals for Magi, Medicaid, and the CalFresh until maybe the month or throughout across the board. And starting maybe May and June, we see an increase in the non-Magi, Medical, and the CalFresh, CalWorks combo added to the mix. Next slide, please. And the last item, last data point I would like to highlight here is the SAR-7, the periodic reports by county. Since go live, we received, since November, we received 127,000 SAR-7 periodic reports submitted. And the pattern here by county is also pretty similar to the number of applications by county as well. We see higher number of volume or the applications for the SAR-7s from the larger counties. It aligns very much with that, so nothing unusual from that perspective too. With that, I will be handing over to Rachel for the user metrics.
Okay. Last month at the board meeting, there was a request from the previous board meeting to share numbers around account creation and usage from YBN in the transition to Benefits Cal, and I had provided verbally the update of the accounts that had been created. So just wanted to walk through quickly what I had presented last month. So from a YBN perspective, there were roughly 1 million users that had to access their accounts in the 6 months leading up to the Benefits Cal go live. Since YBN went live, there was 4.7 million accounts that had been accessed. And when we looked at the actual usage of users that were logging in at least a month leading up to the go live, and that's at 18 months, 12 months, and 6 months leading up, we had 141,000 people logging in to Benefits Cal at least once a month in the 6 months leading up, 93,000 in the year leading up, and the year and a half before that was 63,000. To date, we have had 327,000 and change accounts that have been created in Benefits Cal to date, and we will anticipate that as people get their SAR-7s due and their recertifications and their renewals due, that we will see those account numbers increase month over month. Okay, last, YBN is your benefits now. It's the Los Angeles County self-service portal and mobile application is what YBN is. Okay, if we could move to the next slide. I think, Michael, we will turn it back over to you.
Okay, great. Lots of good Benefits Cal data there. Any comments or questions from our board members on that presentation? I did see Marla was asking, what is YBN? Well, that's the old portal for LA County. It was called Your Benefits Now. That would be like, I think it's a similar name for Cowan's portal. So YBN was LA County specific portal prior to going live on Benefits Cal. Gilbert, you have your hand up?
Hi, Michael. Yeah, I missed the last meeting and I apologize, but does this presentation then lead us to the final approval and acceptance, and so payment can be rendered and everything, or was that voted on last meeting? And again, I apologize for not catching up before I asked that question.
John, do you want to take that one?
Yeah.
Yes, John.
Yeah, Gilbert, we went through all of those items and QA gave their sort of stamp of approval. I think we're headed in that direction. There's a couple little things that we have to tick and tie, but I haven't received anything from any of the counties that would prevent us from going in that direction. If there is an item of particular concern or question, please send that over to me or to your RM. There's a couple things that we're sort of running to the ground and looking at. We have not signed off yet. I have the authority to be able to do that, but I haven't received any concerns on that. And our throughput continues as we go forward. So there isn't anything that's consequential that the county should feel, but it is a milestone where we do release our holdback payment.
And I appreciate that. And I know that we're working with our regional managers to kind of vet out some of the little nuances about benefits Cal that we would like to see enhanced still, and maybe some reports and stuff, but I understand that wasn't in the scope of work. So therefore we can't, tie that back to the payment, but just want to make sure that we continue to work on benefits Cal and get it to where it can be. Because I think it's a remarkable platform that has so much potential. And I want to just make sure that we continue to pay attention to it.
Absolutely. We concur. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from board members or state partners? Oh, I see Marla's hand up. Go ahead, Marla.
I am very encouraged by the level of use by the our community members for their SAR 7s and their renewals. I don't think that at least the counties I've been in, I don't think we've seen that in my benefits Cal win, that kind of use for the renewals and the SAR 7. So that's very encouraging to me. I'm really, really pleased about that.
Marla, just maybe one point. In the Benefits Cal application today, the community-based organizations can upload a digitized image of the SAR 7. Right now, they cannot submit it as an electronic as though a customer would. So right now, the way that they're doing this is through an upload of the SAR 7 document, but the uptick is really high. I'll say that. Yeah.
Yeah, and even an uploaded digital image is better than getting it in the mail.
Yes, absolutely.
Great.
Any other comments or questions from our board members? Okay, I don't hear any public comment. Jen, I do see you put something in the chat. We can also respond in the chat to you as well.
Yep, that's fine. Thanks.
Okay, we'll go ahead and respond there. Any other public comment? Okay, we'll go ahead and drop the response for Jen in the. Okay, thanks, Rachel. Thanks for the presenters, and we'll go ahead and move on to our next item. I believe that brings us to an overview of the Accenture Change Notice 19. My agenda.
Thanks, Michael. This is Dawn Wilder with Gainwell, and I'm going to go ahead and give you an update on the Benefits Cal Technical Help Desk Services. This particular slide you did see last time. I'm just wanting to refresh what our topic area is. We are really looking to assist the counties with public or CBO Benefits Cal incidents, so calls that they receive that they're unable to resolve themselves. We're looking to provide them a warm transfer. We also want to track those incidents and hopefully get them all resolved for those individuals, but we will have a handoff to level 3 support if we need to do so. Right now, the consortium is temporarily filling this gap. And so we are not changing, however, the fact that the counties will do the initial support and there will still be level 3 support, but we will be putting in a much more formal structure around being able to handle those calls that the counties cannot. So if you want to go to the next slide, we're really trying to answer a question that was asked the last time around what is it that the Benefits Cal Technical Service Desk will be able to support for these individuals when they are transferred to our support line. And so again, we anticipate that the counties will be handling anything that's related to their benefits, policy, is the amount correct? Those types of items are clearly going to be handled by the county. They would also probably handle some of these in terms of the technical item. If it's a very simple, obvious situation in which someone's on the wrong page and the person can assist them with that, they will certainly take care of that. However, other items, which we have a list of them here, are the types of things that we do anticipate coming to the Benefits Cal technical service desk because these are the things that the consortium is receiving today. So it's things like they can't get logged in, they can't create an account, they can't get to the portal itself, they can't get a document to upload, they have a system error message. Browser compatibility seems to be one of the items that comes in relatively frequently. The functionality isn't displaying properly. Perhaps their screen looks strange, or it's not working the way they expect it to. So again, not seeing the amount or not seeing something about your case that isn't what you expect is something the counties would handle, but the Benefits Cal portal doesn't seem to be working for them is something that the technical service desk would go ahead and assist with. So that's the rough scope of what the technical service desk will be dealing with in terms of some example ideas. And that was again in relation to a question we received last time around what types of calls will this group be handling. So with that, Michael, I will turn it back to you for questions.
Great. Well, I'm really excited about this. I think it's closing a definite gap for us, and I think it's going to improve services for the public as well as for our ability and value to serving the public, that we're going to have a really good fulsome 360 connection on this. So thanks, Don, for your team to be stepping in and helping facilitate that. So I'll open up to any questions or comments from our board members or our state partners on this.
Hi, this is Sayori. Is there an opportunity for reporting to know why folks are being routed one way or the other? It will just help us with the overall performance measures.
So yes, we will be actually tracking. That's part of the reason we are going to be entering tickets and putting them into ServiceNow so that we can actually analyze what are the situations that are occurring, what can be done to actually avoid those situations, where are they being routed to, and also those that get routed to tier 3, we'll be looking to see if those are things that we can actually get our technical service desk here to assist with through continuous learning activities.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sayori. That's actually a great point. I think that'll be a good ongoing learning tool for us to find out how we can shore up each side of the level 1, level 2, level 3, and the handoffs, whether people come back for case-related information or not. I think that'll be important to track as well. So look forward to that, Don. Any other questions or comments from our board members or our state partners? Okay, hearing none. Public comment on this item?
Hi, this is Jennifer from the Advocates Group. Is there a timeline for when this will be available for counties?
Very good point.
Yeah, we're currently finalizing that timeline actually. So we are quite close on having all of our technical aspects taken care of. Our individuals are hired at this point and they have been through training. So we have some communication items to do and we need to work with the individual counties. Our intention is actually to start with Los Angeles and then move to the former C4 counties and then be prepared to work with each of the Cal-WIN counties for their waves. So again, we have started this relatively recently. So we are catching up, if you will, in terms of making sure that we make that timeline. But we are tracking well to be able to get Los Angeles going in September, but I do not yet have a specific date.
Thank you. That's really exciting. And thank you again to the project for creating this response to the need with consumers and eligibility workers need as well. One other question, if the project is temporarily covering this gap, is it through a similar warm handoff or is it being done some other way currently?
So currently there is the option to do a warm handoff, but they are having a large volume. And so some folks are ending up, leaving other methods of contact, but they do currently have an option for a warm handoff.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Don. Any other public comment? Okay, great, great questions, great comments, and a great presentation. Thank you. So we'll go ahead and move on. Thanks, Don. MFA, is that our next one? Yep.
Hey, Michael, this is Mike Tambakian. I'll be covering for Luz, and apologies, I don't have my video. My internet is a little bit unstable, so I will be only on audio. So I know from our previous meeting, we talked about there was some recommendations to start looking at how we can market the SMS adoption across the counties for MFA, and so some statistics. So as of yesterday, the number from 138 users that have registered for SMS for MFA has gone up to 194. So a little bit of progress over the past few weeks. We met with the regional managers to discuss how to best market for the SMS MFA registration. And so the couple of things, some good ideas came out of that. And so the suggestions were to create some flyers that can be posted inside the offices to encourage staff to register for SMS. Also, it was recommended to create a kind of how-to video to how can the user register for SMS, and also a little snippet or video on showing the delegated admins how they can shift a user from using email to SMS as well. And then those videos will be utilized at their regional meetings. We are also looking at the callback feature as another enhancement to SMS. So people would get a phone call back to whatever device that they choose with that MFA code. On the lessons learned, this is again similar as what we had last month. We still encourage everybody to register for SMS because we know that sometimes email is unstable at the counties, or it goes down for a period of time. If they register for SMS now, in the future, if email goes down, it'll be easy for the delegated admin to go and just flip them to SMS as a backup option. Again, and we did prep a CIT that's going out as a reminder for the counties to look at their allow list or domains, and we also discussed this in the TPOC meetings as well with the counties. Also, if there's any antivirus scans that are being done on the county servers, because the emails are going to be increasing with the MFA, we want to make sure that the devices that are being used for scanning have the necessary throughput for that as well, because of the increased emails. Okay, next slide, please. So the other aspect that we had was to look at the option for allowing the user that's logging in to the system to choose if they want to use email for their MFA or SMS, not requiring the delegated admin to make that switch, but allowing the user, similar to what we do in Office 365 today, what's available in Office 365. So the team is working for that, working on that. We have registered an SCR CA248508 to address that, and so the team is working on that piece. The other item was to reduce the MFA frequency. That is still ongoing. We are still working on that. The proof of concept is still in a lower environment. It's being worked on, but hopefully we can get to that. A little bit of what that means is that we will allow the user to do MFA less frequently throughout the day, instead of every single time, like if they go for lunch break or something like that, they come back, they have to do MFA today. This would recognize kind of their device or browser and waive that requirement for doing MFA multiple times a day, maybe like a 12-hour period, something of that nature. So that's still in progress. The other item that we have that we've discussed before was the session timeout for our third-party vendors like Highland and Click Reports. We continue to work with those vendors to see where it is on their roadmap. But this is a functionality that the vendors have to make a change to allow this functionality to occur. That's it. I'll pass it back to you, Michael. Any questions?
Thank you, Mike. This last page, those are items I think are tremendous enablers for further adoption and use and effectiveness of this, and especially in our more and more remote services kind of environment where people are working from anywhere at any time. I think these three areas are really going to be helpful. So I want to keep pressing, for trying to get progress made in those ones, because I think it's going to help you a lot in your adoption. I do see Gilbert has his hand up, so I'm gonna turn over to Gilbert for any questions or comments he has.
Thanks, Michael. And I would echo that sentiment that I truly appreciate the work that we are doing to try to make the MFA process better, more efficient, and more in alignment with what we see in other industries when it comes to MFA. So much appreciated that we're actually delegating some time, effort, and energy to this work. I do want to just comment, and I know I've said this before, but I will say it again, going back to the previous screen and talking about the lessons learned on the SMS, because I truly believe that is where maybe some more effort could be given. And the reason, and maybe I'm just not understanding the simplicity as it's being described, because what I'm hearing from the staff as we've talked about this SMS process, you know, to enroll everybody into SMS is a process in and of itself, because they're currently going to have to, every user up to almost 3,000 of them are going to have to go in when they sign in, change it to SMS, and then there's an email process to verify that they're really changing it to SMS, and then put them on an SMS. Now they're registered, which is great. Now they have to go back and unregister and put them back into just the regular MFA through email. So that's one. I understand it's just a one-time kind of thing, but it's going to take some hours of effort to all staff, almost 3,000 of them, to change. Then the second makes it sound simple is that when we do have an email outage, the county administrator can simply just switch everybody to SMS. My understanding is it's a one-by-one switch to SMS, and I have one administrator, and it's going to take quite some time for one administrator to change everybody to SMS. So I really would hope that as we continue to work on those other three topics, if we could work on something where there's just an option when you sign on to select which way to MFA, rather than having to default to only one and then changing to another default. So just my comments. And again, I know I've said this before, but I'm really kind of passionate about this kind of stuff. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Gilbert. I think, Mike, that kind of speaks to the point I was making about that option, because it's the way it worked for me. And 365 is if it's not working for one, I can click the other button and I've got another channel. We want to make it like that. We want it to be that. And for people working remotely, that's a tremendous advantage. They'll be down less time. They'll be, you can hear just Gilbert's description about how arduous it is to kind of go all the way around through administrators and back and resetting. So as much priority can be put on that, the better, because I think it's really going to make the adoption and the usage of it that much more effective for us.
Absolutely. We'll definitely take that back. And I think in the last meeting, you also mentioned that you wanted that capability, and we're moving in that direction. I think one additional item that Gilbert brought up was the ease of after I register for SMS, let me select what I want it to be the next time I log in, instead of defaulting to SMS and having to change it back to email. So we'll look into that as well.
Yeah. And mine actually lets me choose. It pops up a screen and then I pick which one I'm going to do.
Right.
That's like the ultimate we want to get to. So hopefully we can. Because if it can be done on 365, it can be done on other platforms.
And that's what we're driving to. Yeah. So the user makes the selection at the time of login.
Yeah, that's the most flexible, right? That's great. Okay. Any other questions or comments on this item? I guess we got a little passion around it. Okay. Any public comment? Okay, great. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate the updates. We'll keep tracking this one and looking for progress on those other three areas. We'll go ahead and move on to the next item, and I believe that's our CalSAWS system stability tickets, defect status.
Yeah, so this is, and coming back as far as an update on the action items around quality associated with the offshore team as we ramp up the offshore team. So just as an overall summary, what we have is a slide that breaks out the ratio of work being done by release between the onshore team in the blue and the offshore team in the orange. And so you can see that the Amendment 29 went into effect on March of 2022, and we're seeing the ratios grow as these future releases come on from the split of work effort between onshore and offshore. So while we see a variety exceeding 41% of the work on like 2205, you have to look at the entire work because all this is going on in parallel as well. So we're really at 35% staffing levels offshore right now if you look across 2203 all the way through 2205. So we're still ramping up to that 40%. If we move on to the next slide, please. What we're seeing from a quality perspective is that quality is remaining consistent. And actually, with the last two releases, 2203 and 2205, where we're having the higher degree of offshore participation, the associated defects with offshore is in line with the combined of onshore offshore combined. So what we're seeing is with the calculation of the rework hours against the actual hours for the release, that's how we're calculating that. So it's basically the ratio of rework hours for the releases. We're seeing high quality coming from the offshore teams. If we move on to the next slide. Then if we take a look at our SLA, so on a monthly basis, what we've been really focusing on is being transparent in reviewing our SLA performance. And we know that in July, you'll see that more red showed up. This is directly related to those 3 outages that I talked about at the start of the meeting. And so we have good progress on our help desk diagnosis time. There's another slide further down that I'll cover the progress being made there. The daily peak hour usage in Prime is related to that forge rock issue that we had on Friday, July 15th. And then the daily batch production jobs completion was related to the meds interface. So from that perspective, we definitely see that we have a dip in July. We expect August to be coming in cleaner. If we move on to the next slide. So where we're looking at it from a code quality perspective is just looking at our production defect backlog. So this is related to our service desk diagnostic time as well as quality. And what we can see is that we continue to be in a relative same range of defect over by week. And we expect to see a slight spike with the 2207 release, and we saw that, and we're seeing that spike come back down again. We see a definite uptick after the releases as some items do go through and those get resolved quickly. If we move on to the next slide, please. From a daily Prime availability, this is a double click into
Arnold?
the SLA. Yes,
Arnold,
sir.
just a sec. I see Becky's hand was up, and it might be 2 slides ago, but I want to see if she had a question before we lose the slide.
Thank you, Michael. I do. I have a question. If you can go back 2 slides, slide 72. There's a column there, and I apologize if I missed it in your overview, Arnold. What is LD?
That's liquidated damages. So that is when we miss the SLA, we pay what's called a liquidated damage or a penalty for missing the SLA. So when you see the check mark there on the LD, that is where Accenture pays for the miss in the SLA.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, those are
welcome.
contact control instruments, and these kind of contracts are very common. Thanks, Arnold. We'll go ahead and go back.
Absolutely. Thank you for catching that. All right, if we move on from here to the next slide. So on the service or monthly help desk diagnosis time, if you recall, this has been a big effort, and we're seeing very positive results on all the steps that are being taken around being more responsive, getting the user's questions answered and resolved in a timely manner within the service level agreement. We're seeing that we're up to 96%. So we're within 2% of the 98% target, which is a big change from the April timeframe when we had dipped down to 71.8. So we're seeing a very good trend with ongoing focus of the teams, with the lessons learned being shared with the service desks, with the communications that are going out to the user community, especially around those items that are more requests for information versus actual system defects. So very good trend there. If we move on to the next slide. seeing additional, this just continues to build upon that story of with the focus and the change in process, we continue to see the reduction in the number of tickets that are missing the SLA. So a very positive trend, down to 17 in July. The other important item to notice here is that we have a 30% reduction of inflow of tickets as well. So that's a reflection of the communications and the education of the user community based upon the trends that we're seeing, as well as the quality of the code that's going into production. So we continue to see the inflow of tickets reduce as well. So in July, we saw 2,052 versus in April, we were over 3,000. If you move on to the next slide, please. With this, I'll ask Sarah to come on from Highland, and she'll be able to walk through the Highland SLAs.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Ross Miller, and Highland also has SLAs that we have contractually agreed to meet each month for CalSAWS. So each SLA is tied to specific targets, and if we don't hit those targets, there is a credit of the monthly subscription fee that will be applied if we don't meet the SLA. So similar to those LDs. So we're going to start with uptime. And uptime is the availability of the system in the cloud, including the ability to retrieve and upload documents into the system. So our monthly target, you can see there, is 99.9%. And for July, you can see the July numbers in the green below for the next few slides. There was 100% availability of the system in the cloud. The next slide, we are going to talk about the monthly page view objective. And that objective states that the data center will provide viewing access to a 70 kilobyte page document or smaller in less than 2 seconds. So the monthly target for that, you can see, is 90%. And for July, 99% of page views that were 70 kilobytes or smaller took less than 2 seconds. So the actual number of page views, if we go on to the next slide, for July was just over 7.6 million, and almost 45,000 of those took more than 2 seconds for the system to provide the page view, which is how we arrived at the 99%. The next objective is the database of transaction. If we go on to the next slide, and that objective states that the database transactions will be completed in less than 1 second. And the monthly target for that is 90%. So for July, 99.97% of database transactions took less than 1 second. And I do have some numbers for you. I don't have another slide, but in July, there were 1.16 billion total number of queries. And of those, just over 329,000 took longer than 1 second, with an average of those longer queries taking 1 second. So not too much more over that less than 1 second criteria. Okay, that's all I have.
Back to you, Michael.
Get off of mute. Okay, great. Thank you. This was very informative. So do we have any questions or comments on this presentation? I'm excited to see the quality, Arnold, for the offshore components are tracking very, very similarly to the onshore. That's really great.
Yes, and we're keeping a very close eye on it.
Yes, and all of us are watching SLAs and LDs, so that's terrific. And I'm glad to see our Highland partners also coming up and discussing it, because our imaging system is incredibly important to us, and performance has been looking pretty solid in that area. So thank you. All right, any comments or questions from our board members or our state partners on this presentation? Okay, hearing none. Any public comment? All right, hearing none. Terrific. Thank you, Arnold. Thank you, Sarah. Appreciate you guys' participation on this.
Mike, this is
Thank you.
Jen from the Advocates Group. I just had one question about if the stats on slide 76 included tickets related to benefits Cal, or if they were just for CalSAWS issues.
Okay, we'll go ahead and answer that in the chat for you.
Thank you.
I just saw your question. Thanks, Jen. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on, and we'll answer that in the chat. And I believe that brings us to an update on key state IVNV activities, correct?
Hi, everyone. This is Apurva. I'm from Independent Validation and Verification team. For those of you who don't know our team, we are a project oversight entity contracted through OSI, and we are independent from CalSAWS project and consortium. Our scope is to assess the CalSAWS TTNI activities, and we are currently focusing on the topics which you are seeing on the screen right now. From our independent assessment, we provide our updates back to OSI and the project based on any concerns we see. And from there, let me dive right into our updates, starting with imaging migration. So things are looking really good on imaging. Image and document migration from Kelvin to CalSAWS for wave 1 and subsequent waves are on track. Kelvin imaging UAT successfully got completed on time with high pass rates, and the feedback received from participants was positive. We are also observing the imaging team being involved in preparations for post-deployment activities, and they are also going very well. Moving on to batch performance. The batch performance testing using 43 county data load is currently ongoing, and they are showing good signs of achieving within the 10-hour window. Let me move on to Kelvin data conversion. With the recent mock cutover results, the conversion timing was within 84-hour window, and we are looking really good for wave 1. The project continues to make great progress on the CTT defects, and we are constantly seeing the graph burn down chart going down for that. IVNB team also observed great progress on the collaboration efforts for communication regarding the post-deployment support items, whether it be the case review guides or the awareness on defects which are known to the project and their workarounds. Coming from user acceptance testing and county data validation. So really good progress in all these items. I'll quickly cover the last two items. Kelvin Wave 1 implementation readiness. So our team is tracking a couple of items here, starting with UAT. As updated earlier, UAT was divided into two groups, and group 1 ended successfully on time with high pass rates. We are currently in group 2 UAT, which is expected to end on August 22nd. And overall, we really observed that the team is doing a great job on triaging the findings, following the defect resolution process and communicating about those findings to the participants. Similar feedback on process simulation, where we observed that the wave 1 counties found value in those validation efforts, and even our team observed great collaboration within the project and the counties on process simulation. Our team is also reviewing a couple of artifacts, including the critical path work plans for wave 1 through 3, implementation support plan, and we have observed great progress in the past few months. The project is continuously making improvements in their strategy in the post-implementation support, not just for wave 1, but also for the subsequent waves. Moving on to the last item, CalSAWS and benefits Cal releases. Last time we saw a really successful release, 2207. And currently our team is tracking progress on 2209. And for benefits Cal, release 4.0 was a successful release. And currently we are tracking testing progress on 4.1.5, which is the ARPA release, and scope and discussion items for release 5, which are also moving along in the right direction. And that's my update from IVNB. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Any questions or comments from our board members on that presentation? Okay, not hearing any. Any public comment on that presentation? Okay, I just want to thank our IV&D partners. They're, like I've mentioned before, they are our watchdog or extra set of eyes. And if something doesn't look right, I expect them to be advising the board of it. So it looks like we have a pretty good handle on things here, and we're going to go ahead and come to the end of the meeting. I don't know if John is still there, if we have any adjournment announcements or anything. I don't have any.
Nope, I think appreciate everybody's time, and I think we're right on time again, Michael.
All right, great. Thank you guys for dedicating this time on these Fridays. The next meeting is September 9th, at least in my calendar it is, at 12:30. And if I'm wrong, they'll send out an update to you. But enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you very much for continuing your in-depth participation in this. Take care, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Nice weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.
Enjoy your weekend.